and I am back with a new story. This is a part 1 of the story about what if Ash went back in time to his first day of Pokémon journey. What if Cyrus was successful and had destroyed the world of Pokémons? And what if Ash was saved by someone and how that someone helps him to go back in time with some mysterious powers to save the world of Pokémons? So let's see what will happen in Ash's Pokémon journey and how he will save the Pokémon world from different types of enemies. Ash Super Strong Team, Good Jesse James and Meowth. Remember to like, subscribe after this video and make sure to share it with your friends. Now let's begin. Ash Ketchum, trainer of Pallet Town, winner of the Orange League and increasingly close runner-up in 5 other regional tournaments, was confused. He was floating in black, empty nothingness. No light, no sound, nothing to use as a reference point, and, at first, he wasn't sure how he'd ended up there. When he tried to remember, instead of the most recent moments he found something strange happening. His mind went straight back to the earliest moments he could remember, flicking past at astonishing speed, as though his whole life were flashing before his eyes on fast forward. A few things stood out, as though he was slowing down to think about them more clearly. The first time he saw a Pokémon, at barely 2 years of age, when Professor Oak, taking care of him when Ash's mother was shopping, was called away suddenly and Ash, Gary and Daisy were left under the supervision of his distinguished old Arcanine, a gentle Pokémon, but a terror in battle decades before when Samuel Oak was the league champion. Only reviewing this long-forgotten past now did Ash truly realize that he had felt things differently. Other people, he knew, would feel the heat running under the fire Pokémon's fur. But few would feel the surging, volcanic power in Arcanine's breast just from being near, faintly, but still somehow there to be felt. Ash hadn't mentioned it at the time, or later. He simply assumed that was what people felt. But now, he was older, and made a connection which suddenly seemed obvious. Aura, he thought. I can feel his aura. The gentle amusement, the tiny little part of its mind always on the ready for danger. It's just like that Riolu back in Sinnoh, and Lucario. The memory dissolved, and his life played itself out again, perhaps a little slower than before. The time he was 5, at Cinnabar Island on the black sand beaches, and a snatch of haunting song floated through the air. I know that music, Ash realized. But how? What would Lugia have been doing this far north of Shamouti? Could it be because of me? The prophecy said I was the chosen one. 8. Playing in the copse of trees at the end of the road that led to the sea. It was all one big argument with Gary, more than playing. But, as this memory played out like the others, there was a glimpse of something in the trees. Barely a flash, but the memory stopped. And Ash marveled. This was not what he had expected to find in his childhood. For what was unmistakably Suicune was in the underbrush, observing for but a moment. The memory moved on, and the legendary Pokémon vanished in a blue blur. The Ash of the past had dismissed it as unimportant, but this Ash, who knew Suicune, and had even ridden the Master of the North Wind, recognized it as real. He saw his dreams as well now, running through each night in barely a second, but the pattern was becoming clear now he saw them in succession. Ash dreamed of Pokémon, only those he had seen, and touched, himself, but they were all there, every night, and in startling detail. His suspicions were confirmed when his memory passed one sad night in November, the year before he had set off on his journey, when Oak's old Arcanine had passed away in its sleep. At nearly 50, it had had a good run, but it had been a noble friend and the town was saddened by its loss. And Ash no longer dreamed of Arcanine. A strong link. Continue. As the rush of memories approached the present, Ash could catch more and more details until it was almost like reliving the events in fast forward. And those memories now were mostly very happy ones. When he first met Pikachu, that rocky start which turned into a shining, unbreakable bond. Gym battles, applying himself to training and strategy, meeting all his Pokémon. He saw his Pidgeot, as Pidgeotto, with a guilty start. In the excitement of the Orange Islands, and Johto, and later Hoenn and Sinnoh and Unova, he had all but forgotten his promise to come back for her. Then there was something new. Ash watched in surprise as he and his friends traveled through a storm to an island he didn't remember seeing, and met Mewtwo. But rather than being the compassionate recluse he remembered, this Mewtwo was bitter and violent. Watching closely as this unknown chapter of his life unfolded, Ash saw it all. The clones, the battle, his death, and his resurrection. It was awe-inspiring to watch, the more so when he realized that he had been the one to make such a difference in Mewtwo. After that, there were no more big surprises, just the reminder of everything he'd done, crystal clear instead of being crowded out by the moment. Falling from great heights. Wielding the blue flame of aura. More falling from great heights. Being possessed by an ancient king. And, of course, his friendships with all his Pokémon. Finally, the moving narrative passed New Torque and reached the present, traveling with Iris and Scylla through the Decolor Islands, knowing that their adventure together was soon to end but unwilling to admit it. And then, there had been a heavy feeling in the air, and everything had suddenly seemed wrong. The very air felt alien. And then blackness, and this. Ash swallowed a lump in his throat. Pikachu. Everyone, what happened? A moment later, a voice reached him. So, it sounded familiar. What do you think? He will suffice. This second voice was even more familiar, but Ash couldn't quite place it. More, it was a mental voice. Telepathy, but with such intensity it seemed to touch his very core. No need to be so mellow about it. The kid's a natural. More so than I ever was. Nevertheless, you will need to train him. I can't argue with that, the first voice agreed. Closer. This time, or it sounded closer, at least. It wasn't as if Ash had a ruler. 1 week. I can hold the separation for that long, but no longer. The weight of what wants to be is pressing down from all directions. It'll be enough. Like I said, he's a natural. Suddenly Ash was standing on a solid surface. He could move, he could feel and see, and then he saw who had been speaking. Even for his adventure-filled life, it was a shock. Sir Aaron of Cameron Castle, hero of the wave, stood before him in the black void. Fully dressed, and with a crooked smile on his face. So, Ash Ketchum, the hero said. It's nice to meet you at last. Ash took a few minutes to stop gaping. So, the world ended? Ash asked, frowning. Right in one, Sir Aaron agreed, sitting cross-legged on solid nothingness. This is all the boss was able to protect. He shrugged. From what I was told, this Cyrus guy. Cyrus. Ash interrupted. But, he disappeared. I watched it happen. Sir Aaron pursed his lips. Well, whatever might have happened, he came back, and managed, this time, to get Dialga, Palkia and Giratina. A sigh. Some people are just the wrong kind of lunatics, crazy enough to be worrying, competent enough to be dangerous. So he managed to get them, and get control of them, and remake the world in his own image. Ash winced. What happened? Well, the universe basically started to come apart at the seams. None of the Celebi could help because Dialga's power was changing the rules of time, and as for trying to intervene. How come we're here, then? Ash asked. Was it this, boss, you mentioned? All in good time, Ash, Sir Aaron said. Now, you saw your life, and so did we. That pointed out a few things to us. One of them, in particular, has to do with aura. Right. Like when we went up the tree of beginning, Ash agreed. Sorry about what happened to Lucario, He shook his head. It doesn't matter, Ash, Sir Aaron said. You were there with him at the end. That's more than you could be expected to do without any training. Speaking of which, what you did at the tree showed that you've got natural talent with aura. I mean, a lot of natural talent. Ash blinked. Most novitiates can barely feel their own aura, Sir Aaron informed him. If you'd been around in my day, I'd have snatched you up as an apprentice before anyone else could. Sir Aaron smirked for a moment, at some unexplained joke. Anyway, he went on, I'm going to train you in how to use it. Train me? But, what's the point? I mean, Ash added hastily, if the world ended. All in good time, Sir Aaron repeated. Now, you used these gloves. Do you know what they do? Well, I guess they make using aura easier. Ash shrugged. That's pretty close. They actually work by resonating with a natural aura frequency, specifically, that of the great warrior Sir Aaron. Ash chuckled. You might have heard of him. I think he lives around here, Sir Aaron went on. I might even have his phone number. That was incongruous enough, Ash noticed. You know what a phone is. Arceus kept me up to date. Yeah, I know, Sir Aaron chuckled along with him. Anyway, that means that for you to use them you have to have the same frequency. Which is an incredible coincidence. Again, that unexplained joke. And that means they're kind of an aid, like a bicycle as compared to walking. They give you extra power, but they also make it easier to do things. It had been a long week, a week in which Ash found himself needing neither sleep nor food, one where every single hour was focused on training. Sir Aaron had focused on two things, explaining that they'd be important to get straight now and that the rest could wait for when he had time to train and practice, later. When, later, was never explained, but it was all so interesting that Ash just kept learning exactly what Sir Aaron told him he had to learn. Surprisingly, combat was not on the list. Ash learned a bit of the basics, how to form a shield that lasted a few wobbly seconds and to throw an aura sphere, but that was apparently in the category of learn later. Instead, Sir Aaron first taught him how to train his aura and how to sense when he was doing well, and then he went down an alley into the mental uses of aura. Ash refined his ability to sense a familiar aura signature, and how to see things on the other side of solid walls. He learned how to feel the thoughts of someone nearby and familiar, and a little bit of how to defend his own mind. Strangely, it was the ability to touch the mind of someone else which Sir Aaron seemed happiest about, though his only explanation was what had become his mantra. All in good time. Then, after what felt like 7 days of solid effort, Sir Aaron stopped in the middle of explaining how aura could strengthen the body. What is it? Ash asked, as the knight stood. Is something wrong? No, Sir Aaron replied. Then, out of the darkness stepped Arceus. The creator deity, the original one. And someone Ash had saved the life of once, though it was thousands of years in the past and may have retroactively been unnecessary. He is ready. Ash jumped at the sheer presence. Unwounded and hale, Arceus' mental voice seemed to be more real than Ash himself. But Sir Aaron merely nodded. Yes, he's ready. Very good. Explain to him what I am about to do. Sir Aaron nodded, and turned to look Ash in the eye. The only way Arceus found to prevent Cyrus destroying the world was to prevent it from happening in the first place. So he asked the world beyond, which is unaffected, as yet, whether there was anyone who could help. Aaron smiled. And, as it happened, you've got a couple of people back there who think highly of you. He held up 2 fingers, and tapped the first one. First, there's my old friend Lucario, he recommended you straight away. And secondly, there was the Latios whose soul was in the Soul Dew in Altomari. Whoa, Ash said, trying to get his head around that little detail. So, with that reminder and those references, Arceus and I decided to test you, and we have, in a way. How? Ash asked. We saw your past. You probably noticed. At Ash's nod, Sir Aaron went on. And we were both impressed. It's not everyone who saves the world once, let alone how many times you did, especially considering you're still a teenager. So the choice was clear. Sir Aaron took a deep breath. We're sending you back in time to change all this, he said. There's a reward, of course, the knight went on. For a start, there's how you're now trained in aura. That's just one thing, of course. There's others, which you'll find out later, and the most important one is this. You can choose the time you go back to. It'll be your mind in your younger body, so you can essentially do things again. Sir Aaron held up a hand to forestall any questions. Hold on, I think Arceus is ready. Indeed I am. Arceus stepped aside, to reveal what had been in his shadow. I have created a second Dialga, twin to the one outside. It has the task of sending you back, however far you want to go. Ash barely even had to think about it. I want to go back to the day I met Pikachu, the day my journey began, when I first set off from Pallet. Sir Aaron laughed. Ha. Told you. You great lump. Arceus looked displeased. I thought. Any day but then. Was good odds. Wait. Ash pointed. Were you two betting on me or something? Sir Aaron tugged his collar. No. Somehow. I don't believe you, Ash replied. Now. Dialga. In that second of absolute stillness, Ash thought to himself, using the, or a, legendary Pokémon capable of controlling time simply to avoid having to answer some awkward questions, that really took some beating. Then there was a roar, and he fell into blackness. Sir Aaron folded his arms. Well, that deals with that. What happens next? I admit to some surprise. I had thought the timeline would change instantly, Arceus admitted. I've never had to use the failsafe before. Dia. The young Dialga asked. This is serious. Sir Aaron said. We could be stuck in here for months or years with nothing to entertain ourselves. I created the universe and everything in it. I could always use that massive cosmic power to create a deck of cards. Dialga perked up. Glah. Glah. Sir Aaron took a step back. It's really strange seeing the controller of time jump around like an excited puppy. He is 10 minutes old, what do you expect? Now, quiet, Arceus admonished. I need to create a few packs. Perhaps some dice, too. Can you get Lucario? Sir Aaron asked. We need 4 for a good game. I can't find him, Arceus admitted, his spooky plate pulsing. I suspect that, as his death is no longer certain, he is no longer there. That's somehow unfair. Sir Aaron sighed. Ash came groggily to awareness in his home bed, one that felt almost unfamiliar after so long on the road one way or another. What happened? Did I imagine that last bit? Was I so excited about my trip to issue that I made up what I think will happen? Then he focused on the calendar. Okay. Either I imagined my entire life from the day I got a Pokémon onwards overnight, or I really did time travel. Well, no need to rush. I know there's going to be a Pokémon for me even if oh, who am I kidding? Ash jumped out of bed, dressed himself in seconds with whatever was on the floor and dashed off to Oak Labs. Luckily, by the time he got there the crowd had somewhat dispersed. Everyone was following Gary, and presumably the other 2 thoroughly forgettable trainers that had started out from Pallet that day. Was Gary driving a sports car? At 10. Some people. Gary had really improved and become more likable over the course of the next few years. But then, so had Ash. Professor Oak was waiting for him in the lab. Ah, Ash my boy, I see you have, here the old man's voice and expression turned sour. Finally arrived for the start of your Pokémon journey. Though, sorry to say, there aren't many Pokémon left here at the lab. Hardly any. In fact, Ash tried his best to look disappointed, but his heart was too busy going at 100 beats a minute. Hardly any means at least one, and that means. I'm sorry, Professor. I really do want to get going, honest. I just overslept. Couldn't get to sleep last night, you know how it goes. Indeed I do. Well, I did at any rate. As you get older it becomes less likely you get worked up about such things. But you may be disappointed. The only Pokémon left in the entire lab is this wild Pikachu I caught barely a week ago when it tried to eat the power cables. Ash was cracking up inside. Power cables. Oh. No wonder Pikachu didn't want to talk about it. I'm sure I'll be fine, Professor. I mean, I wouldn't be much an awesome trainer if I couldn't handle something little like that. Ah. The awesome factor. To be young, Professor Oak handed over the Pokeball. Ash immediately opened it up and caught the electric mouse as it formed. He couldn't help it. Even if this Pikachu remembered nothing of their time together, the trials they had faced together, it was still the same Pokémon he would come to, yes, love like a brother. His mind raced through everything the two had been through together. And as he contacted Pikachu, the little yellow rodent glomped him. Ash's now trained aura senses opened the link and he realized something. Somehow, impossibly, Pikachu remembered. Every day they had spent together was as vivid to the other as it was to him. A suspicion came over him, even as he stood back up from where the tackle had flattened him, a huge grin on his face. Maybe this was what Sir Aaron had meant about another reward. He wouldn't be alone. Well, Professor, I think you may have been exaggerating about how difficult this Pikachu was to handle. I certainly thought I wasn't. You have a true talent with Pokémon, Ash. If only you knew. Then Ash had a thought. Samuel Oak, or Sam, certainly did know that this Pikachu would eventually become close to him. The only question was how soon. What would have happened the first time had Ash got up early? Would Oak have hidden the other Pokémon to preserve the timeline? Time travel makes my head hurt. Outside, a small crowd was assembled to see Ash off. Nothing like the hordes of vaguely disturbing cheerleaders that followed Gary around all over the place, but a nice send-off nonetheless. Oh, Ash, here's your bag. You forgot it when you left in such a rush this morning. Hee, thanks. Sorry about that. I think I broke my alarm clock. Well, you won't need it for a while anyway, if you're off on a journey now, will you? Delia Ketchum was by this point a little choked up, and searched for a distraction. Where is your Pokémon? I don't see a Pokeball. Pikachu stuck his head up from where he was clinging onto Ash's back. Hi. Hey, I don't think I'll be keeping any Pokémon in their balls unless they ask me to. It doesn't seem right somehow. It was a recent decision to be sure, but Ash felt it was the right one. His Pokémon seemed a lot happier outside their balls for the most part. Come to think of it, what were the league regulations on maximum number of Pokémon? Was it 6 with you, or just 6 per battle, per gym, or per day? It would be good to know. While he made small talk with the crowd, Pikachu had taken the bag from Ash's mum and was carefully slotting it onto Ash's shoulders. Thanks, Pikachu. I appreciate. Whoa. Pikachu had jumped onto the bag now and was sitting on it, pointing imperiously towards Viridian City. Well, I suppose I'd better get going. He's even more eager for adventure than I am. It was about halfway from Pallet to Viridian when Ash swung his pack off his shoulders, sat down, and motioned to Pikachu to do the same. Guess you're kind of wondering what happened, right? Pikachu answered in the affirmative. Ash sighed. I'm not entirely clear myself. But, well, remember what happened at Cameron Castle, and then with that Riolu and the Pokémon Ranger. Pikachu nodded again. Seems that I'm really good at using aura, especially for a human. Basically, I got sent back in time to stop the end of the world by the creator of the universe, and that, the aura, is why I got picked. No idea how come you have your memories of the future, but, well, we can wonder that later. For now, we need to think about what to do next. We need to visit Cameron Castle to pick up Sir Aaron's gloves, which will make it a lot easier on me, but if we walk there we'll have to beat Brock first. And I don't know if I can bring myself to catch Pokémon I didn't know before. Pikachu thought for a second, before asking if Ash couldn't just catch the same Pokémon again. And how do you expect me to recognize them, especially if they look just the same as other Pokémon? By way of answer, Pikachu covered his eyes, before saying something that Ash translated as, "Aura sight, you fool." After a few seconds simply staring, Ash facepalmed and focused. When he felt the sensation rise up in his eyes, he closed them. It was the first time using it in the real world. It was breathtaking. He could see the world, but that was a thing of outlines in gray and black. More importantly, he could see life. Every tree had a faint green glow around it, and a few stronger points of brown or green light indicated what he thought to be Pokémon in the trees. Perhaps they were bugs, the color presumably had some significance. Pikachu was a blinding yellow that hurt to look at. He would have to test this later. But there was another bright light, a purplish blue glimmer, moving towards Viridian City from behind him. Presumably still a way off, but there it was. It somehow drew his eye. Perhaps that was Misty, on her as of yet undestroyed bike. Well, looked like she was an hour or so away. May as well get started on something else that was bothering him. Opening his eyes, which were momentarily bright blue as the power faded from them, he looked across at Pikachu, who had sat down in the meantime. Okay, Pikachu. Something I think you should learn, if you want to. Hi. The ability and skill to manipulate aura, of course. Partly because teaching this sort of thing helps the teacher learn as well, partly because it's genuinely useful in all sorts of ways, but mostly because that way you can beat up rock types. Pikachu's eyes glistened as he turned to fully face his trainer. Okay. Close your eyes, breathe evenly. Now, pay close attention to this feeling. Ash was kneeling in front of his first Pokémon, who was sitting cross-legged on the bulge around the roots of a tree along the path. As he spoke, he put his hands on Pikachu's, and then channeled at first a tiny amount of aura, gradually increasing it until the glow was clearly visible. Can you feel it? Good. Now, I want you to focus only on that feeling. Pay as much attention to it as you possibly can. Don't worry if it changes, just make sure you can still feel the thrill of power in your hands. Are you paying enough attention? You should be. You are. Good. That's right. Has it stopped changing? Then open your eyes. Pikachu lazily cracked an eyelid and looked at the glow around his hands. It was yellow, which was interesting. Hadn't it been blue? Then he noticed Ash was about 6 feet away. On that realization, the glow died as he startled out of the meditative state. Ash was grinning from ear to ear. Now you know you can do it. 20 minutes later, Pikachu could reliably form his aura outside his body, albeit only as a surface effect. Good. Even being able to form aura means your attacks will be a great deal more potent. It's half the secret of the power of a legendary Pokémon, that they have good aura control. Ash chuckled. In fact, the evolutions have a natural production of a tiny amount of aura. That's why they have such good focus on their elements. Now, the next step is to try and reduce the effects of your natural element of electricity. When it's a neutral aura with nothing attached, that's when it's the blue I had. That's the most useful type of any one, and it opens the door to further type compositions. So while you learn to produce untyped aura, I'm going to be trying to add a type to mine. I'll start with electricity myself, because you're readily available for me to check against. But I think first a little practice on something else. Throw a thundershock at me. Hi. Trust me. Pikachu nodded dubiously, and threw a tiny electric shock at Ash. It hit, but barely made him twitch. Come on. Something bigger. You know I've handled thunderbolts before. The next shock was more in line with the thundershock, on their original first day together. More. Come on. I'm asking for it. Ash was electrocuted about a dozen times a minute for the next half hour, always insisting they keep going over Pikachu's protests. He ended up looking like he was about to drop from exhaustion. Come. Huff. On. One more time. Pikachu was really worried now. Ash couldn't even keep his eyes open. What was he doing? Just. Huff. One more, then phew. Call it quits. Okay. Caw. The sizzling bolt of electricity flashed towards Ash, and was turned aside by a green shimmer in front of him, arcing off towards the left. Yes. Ash's fatigue seemed to evaporate. I knew I could do it. I just need to see where it's coming from, and that means aura sight. The sudden celebration and Pikachu's realization that Ash was trying to make sure he could manage protect still were cut off by a shriek from the road. Ash covered his face with his hands. We just blew up Misty's bike, didn't we? Pikachu nodded. Hi. The young gym leader was lying in a heap in the road with the bike collapsed around her. The tires had been exploded and at least some of the structure looked bent. Oh, man, it's worse than last time. If he were the age he was immediately before the time jump, he would have been getting thoroughly flustered over meeting Misty again. Now, though, there was none of that. One good thing about getting younger was that it meant you didn't have to handle puberty for a year or 3. Can I help you up? Misty looked at the boy and his Pikachu over where she had heard the offer. Her eyes narrowed. So that's where the lightning came from. Why should I accept your help when you did this in the first place? Ash looked abashed. Well, it was an accident, and I feel kinda guilty. It feels like my responsibility, right? She huffed. Fine. But you better pay for this. Story of my life. What was that? I don't know what you were talking about. Now, take my hand and I'll pull you up. On touching the young boy's gloves, Misty had the most amazing experience. Several years' worth of life flowed into her memory, and a light static charge passed into her, tingling at her belt where the Pokeballs were as well. Misty, reacting instinctively, punched Ash onto the floor. Okay. Ash. What the hell just happened? Ash grinned up at her, unfazed. What just happened is that, as far as you're concerned, you traveled back in time and so did I. There's more to it, but that's the simple version. Misty considered this. She was indeed younger than she had been, no. Only had 3 Pokémon, if anything, worse, and was barely outside Pallet Town. Okay. Spill it. Why? How and why you? The world apparently ended. Some nutcases called Team Galactic tried to take over the world by rebuilding it from the ground up with Dialga and Palkia. Arceus picked me to go back because I was the chosen one, good with aura. With what? Ash stopped for a second. I'll be willing to demonstrate, and indeed have a go at teaching you, just let me finish first. Anyway, Arceus got another Dialga to throw me back in time to this morning, and apparently I can restore the memories of others of the future. Now, this is aura. Ash closed his eyes for a second, and held out a palm. A thin, pale blue fire glowed there for a moment. I'm still not really any good with the big stuff, I was more taught how to train than trained, but I know how, well, where, to get the big power and control boost I need. Right. Ash is somehow magic. She shrugged. Seen stranger things traveling with you weirdness magnets. So, we're saving the world. Hi. Brilliant. So much for my plans for the decade. Not necessarily. I can do the memory thing on any Pokemon, or apparently person, I spent enough time with. Think of it as, you start where you were before the whole mess happened, and you get to go on from there. Well, I suppose that makes sense. So what now? Now we try to make it to Viridian before that storm gets here. Misty looked round. Sure enough, there was a thunderstorm on the horizon. It was a good few miles to Viridian, and last time she hadn't made it on the bike before the storm caught her. Damn it, now I'm going to get wet. This is your fault, Ash. Misty. Ash waited until she was looking at him. You're a water trainer who spent 3 hours with a rebreather once. Okay. So maybe it's not as much a problem, but still. Besides, that's a thunderstorm and I don't like lightning. Ah well. Things get to worst. Apparently Pikachu can deflect lightning bolts, so we'll be okay. The walk to Viridian, even through the thunderstorm, was surprisingly pleasant for Ash without the horde of rampaging psychotic Spearow from last time. Though the occasional flare of yellow, blue across the sky was a slightly less pleasant reminder of how close he was repeatedly coming to wholesale electrocution. Huh. Strange. Those bolts weren't being deflected so much as bounced right back into the clouds. After a few hours and a stonker of a storm, the rain slowed to a drizzle, then vanished completely. Ash was now looking up at the clearing sky in anticipation. Ash, what are you? SSH. I'm looking for a legendary I first saw on this exact day, one timeline ago. Look out for a whacking great phoenix headed west. Phoenix. Ash, are you sure? I am very sure. Ho-oh, that's what it is. And I met it later on too, just after you and Brock left. How convenient. I swear. It flew overhead, right about now. I see you have come into your power, chosen one. Ash froze. Misty, did you just say that? Misty replied, similarly unmoving. I was about to ask you. Without moving a muscle on their upper bodies, the two turned to see an enormous Pokémon in the shallow valley to the east of the ridge the road rested on. I am surprised. Last time my Suicune checked on you, bare months ago, you showed no real sign of what you could inherit. And here you are flaring your aura with a strength I could have felt clear from Tin Tower. So, Ash Ketchum of the line of Cameron, why has this change occurred? Misty staggered over to lie down on the grass. Pikachu was looking confused. He'd believed in Ash, of course, they'd both seen Ho-Oh before, but had not expected the current course of events. Ash was utterly flabbergasted. The line of what? There is much to tell, and little enough time to do it. I request a mental link. Yeah, sure. That needs contact, right? Correct. The huge right wing moved forwards. Simply take one of the feathers, that will suffice. Ash reached out to the rainbow wing. The world fell away. Color surrounded Ash, as once more he became a mere viewpoint, looking upon something he could not understand, though there was something about it. Thought was what it was, he realized. He was seeing the mind of the legend of the storm's end, a humbling experience. But there seemed to be some kind of message meant, perhaps, for him. He concentrated. History. A few thousand people, dressed in archaic outfits and many of them armed, kneeling before an assemblage of all the legendary Pokémon Ash had ever seen, except for the Issue Pantheon, and apparently pledging themselves to aid their nation's protectors. These are the chosen, who defined these islands as a contiguous whole. They all possessed gifts that allowed them unusual skill. War. Battles, from the time of the Jomon to the Meiji Restoration. Pokémon, in roles not as companions, but as warriors, shock troops, medics, cavalry. True battles of the type the formalized sport bore little resemblance to. And everywhere, the chosen or other heroic figures in the vanguard. Peace. Man and Alakazam climbing to the top of a mountain, to meet an aged priest there, a venerable figure seeming to radiate an inner tranquility. The man is another of the chosen's descendants. They were the most powerful, most skilled, the servants of their people. A flash of movement. The sight of a great flood, and of a strong man pushing, pulling, cajoling and carrying vulnerable Pokémon to safety. The memory showed everything, even to the man losing strength as the cold sapped his muscles, slipping into the water having saved every other man, woman, child and Pokémon in the path of the flood. But every line is vulnerable. The champions died most often, it was the nature of their calling. Once, every city had one or more. Now, there is often only a single one of the warrior chosen across an entire island. Johto and Kanto are bereft but for the dragon tamers, Hoenn has only the Stone Clan, and Sinnoh is overseen by but a single person. I must beg of you, as one of the heirs. Do you wish to join this elite brotherhood? Ash was overwhelmed by the news. So, why me specifically? You are of the line of the Knights of Cameron Castle. Few know it. The line of descent has lost much of its power and lore over the centuries, never truly recovering after the loss of Sir Aaron. Your father found out, at the end, but died in the discovering. It was he who broke the great wave that threatened to sweep away the inhabitants of Pacifidlog. I am sorry if discovering this truth causes you pain. I had not thought of the effect it might have. No, it's kinda nice. To know that he was, well, a hero. To know that he didn't leave by choice, I always feared that. You have a noble heart. And I feel that you have already accepted this destiny. Very well. Now there is one more issue to handle. Do you know what a Pokeball does to those it captures, that can never be undone? Never undone, oh. It makes it so that the Pokemon can't be caught again. Because that stops people stealing them. Correct. So, I ask this. Catch me in one of your Pokeballs, then release me again and let me go on my way. Then do the same with others of the legendary pantheons who request it of you. You are a good man, and we will be safe in this way from those who would seek to chain us. There was the sense of a grin's reflection, ethereal in the shared world. And who knows? We might pitch in from time to time. Imagine the spectacle at a contest. So, is that sort of thing why I occasionally saw people with legendary Pokémon in Hoenn or Sinnoh? Same principle, they're presumably well trusted. To be honest, were it not for their duties, Pokémon like the Shimauti Lugia would have followed you to whatever end. But enough. Time marches on, and you have work to do, as do I. But rest assured, I and mine will do whatever we can for your cause. There is, after all, not often a time someone will be able to legitimately say, Arceus told me to do it. And with that, the link faded. Wow. To those outside less than a second had passed, but they saw quite the impressive blue, gold light show for the brief contact time there was. Then it was gone. Ash stumbled as he got used to controlling his body again. Do you accept this charge, chosen one? He looked almost weary for a moment, then pulled himself up again. Sure. After all, it's not as if I have nothing to show for it this time, so why should I not do something I did before? An admirable attitude. And now, the Pokeball. Oh, sorry. Ash took out one of his Pokeballs from Oak and tossed it at Ho-Oh. The Pokeball did its work and lay there unmoving, at least until Ash picked it up and promptly released the Phoenix Pokemon. My thanks. And fare thee well. The trio gazed at the majestic Feng Wang as it took to the air and winged off to the west, headed for a critique and the Tin Tower. Well, at least until Ash jerked as if stung and clawed his Pokédex out of his jacket. Damn it, I can't believe I forgot. Professor Oak'll have to believe me this time. He pointed the scanner at the receding Ho-Oh. No data. There are still Pokemon yet to be. Ash hit the machine with the palm of his hand. BZZRT. Compiling. New program structure successfully loaded. Analyzing. Ho-Oh, the rainbow Pokemon. Sometimes called the guardian of the skies, or the storm's end. Legends claim this Pokemon flies the world's skies continuously on its magnificent seven-colored wings. It is said that those who see Ho-Oh are promised an eternal happiness. Accessing. Total remaining Pokemon in National Dex. 2. Conjecture is that they are evolved forms of Porygon. Form database also still incomplete. Ash, Misty and Pikachu stared at the little red machine. I'd say you broke it, but it seems to contain all the stuff we haven't done yet. How is the professor going to take this? He's time traveled before, he'll come around. And if he doesn't, we'll just convince his past self in a year or two. Ash paged through the various pictures of Pokemon that had been recorded for the database, from the bland images of things like Weedle, to Charizard posing against the backdrop of Ash with his hair on fire, to the Phanpy that Ash had raised, to the somewhat startling image of Mew and Mewtwo firing great blasts of energy at one another, and Ash, frozen in the act of running into the middle. I don't remember that one. Hey, Ash, do you remember apparently committing suicide by Legendary? Well, when I was getting the short version of my own life something like that turned up. Ash scratched his head. But I don't see why I wouldn't recall, it seems kind of important. Nobody does. The Mewtwo, the genetic Pokemon, in the picture wiped everyone's minds. But I am electronic, and unaffected. Ash, you did remember to clear the cache on that thing once in a while, right? Ash was looking a little frazzled. I'll be happy to answer that in a second, Pikachu, right after we find out why I just understood that. Pikachu was not coping all that well himself. Ka pai. Yeah, I did hear the thing about the cache, it's just I don't know how. Unless it's another thing with Aura, like how I could hear some of the thoughts of that Riolu in Sinnoh. Pikachu frowned in concentration. That's probably it. I mean, you already awakened my aura to some degree, maybe that pushes it over the edge into communication. I heard that one as well. Wow, this is awesome. Ahem. And yes, that is correct. Normally this would never happen, but then most computers aren't involved in half the stuff that fills the average week for you crazy people. And with no cache clears, I developed a personality. Good thing too, as it means you've essentially done your duty to the professor and can do other stuff without feeling guilty. This is going to be weird. Tell me about it. Misty had wandered off to where Ho-Oh had been. Hey, guys, look. She was holding a rainbow-hued feather, and a small drawstring bag. Sacred Ash, how ironic. Shut up, Misty. It's perfect. I didn't even see the joke before you mentioned what it's called. Please, stop. I have enough trouble knowing an ancient prophecy has a pun on my name in it, let me retain a shred of dignity. Oh, I just thought, if we're doing everything again that means. What now? You're going to be turned into a Pokemon. Oh, and have to crossdress a few times. Ash slumped over the sign proclaiming the city limits of Viridian. Why me, Arceus? Couldn't someone else have been stuck with this? Misty was unrepentant. Because you have a stupid impossible childhood dream most likely, now get going. It's almost dark. Ash and Misty walked into the Viridian Pokemon Center. Misty immediately went off to have some time with her Pokemon, and would shortly discover, much to her surprise, that all three had been included in the memory transfer, while Ash headed straight for the computer terminal. Pikachu, can you make sure the rockets haven't turned up yet? Of course. Be nice to see them again. Really. Hopefully they won't waste years of all our lives trying to catch me in one of those horrid Pokeballs again, though. You're telling me. Ash was of course familiar with the way the phones worked this time and was the one to place the call to Pallet, rather than the other way around. Ah. Ash, my boy. Ash felt faintly embarrassed. Professor. The other camera. Oak looked round, startled, then brought up the correct camera. Sorry. Anyway, what news, Ash? I take it you made it to Viridian all right. No problems along the way. None at all. And I wish to report on the Pokédex project. Well done, my boy. Progress so soon. I hope you found more than Gary. Apparently he accidentally caught a Spearow flock leader and they nearly outflew his car, so he didn't have time even to scan a Rattata. I have a little more than that, thanks. Ash grinned at the private joke. And, for that matter, the news that the incredibly psychotic Spearow was now Gary's problem. But first off, I want to tell you something of the utmost importance. I'm sure it's not as big a deal as you make it out to be. I mean, things always seem important at 10. But when you grow up, they're not as big a deal as you thought. Ash dropped the easy humor that he'd developed over the past few years with those he was familiar with. I know about Celebi. It was interesting, watching a world-famous researcher choke and fall off his chair. After a few minutes, the conversation resumed. Oak was holding a flask that seemed a little too likely to hold something alcoholic for Ash's taste, but then, everyone had their vices. Dear Lord. Time travel. Well, it didn't actually involve Celebi, but yes. There was indeed time travel. As far as things go, mentally I'm about 15, and have saved the world a minimum of 9 times. If this works, it'll make 10, irrespective of all the things I'll stop twice. Oak took another pull from the flask. I wouldn't believe you, but in my case that'd be hypocritical. I remember that. Tell me, if I got up first, were you planning on hiding the other starters? Oak looked even more evasive. Actually, the Charmander hasn't been taken yet. That trainer slept in, stayed up all last night. I hope she gets up tomorrow. Right. Ash slid his Pokédex into the peripheral slot. Transfer all the information, if you please. The lot. Yeah, may as well. Professor Oak was glaring at his hip flask and occasionally shaking it. Okay. Next question. What's the league limit on the Pokémon someone can have with them at one time, and what are the specifics? The professor looked thoughtful. I think it says that all battles must use only up to 6 Pokémon at a time, but in practice, since the belts with the Pokéball supports can't take more than 6, people don't carry any that are over that limit. Right. Not going along with that custom. I'm taking everyone with me I can. I don't want to leave anyone behind who doesn't want to be. Actually, I think if I got a satellite uplink, then you could use the transfer system at any time. That might help. Okay. Next. When is the next tournament at Cameron Castle? I have business there, and fairly urgent at that. Professor Oak was by now discovering that a motivated Ash ran roughshod over just about anything in his way. From jumping into a clash of 2 of the most powerful Pokémon on the planet to hurling one of those same Pokémon into a lake to save it, Ash was not one to mess around, that was for sure. Hang on. The professor typed away furiously at his keyboard. There we are, it's in about 2 weeks. Do you want me to enter you? That would be great. And can you also look up the articles on claiming one's inheritance here in Kanto? Pikachu looked over from his vigil at the door. You do not do anything halfway, Ash. Well, we all knew that. Did I miss something? Pikachu and I are now mutually telepathic. It happens. Thankfully for the professor, Ash's Pokédex let out the chime that meant it was finished uploading. All done. Don't stay up too late looking at them. Okay. And I'll get back to you on the other stuff. Thanks, Professor. Ash stretched, and grabbed his Pokédex back from the computer. Any sign of them yet? Not that I can see. Right. Ash pulled his cap back and shut his eyes. There. They were somehow obvious in aura sight, glowing in a more intense way than those nearby. Perhaps this was because he held their memories. In any case, it was time to put the plan into action. Pikachu, with me. You got it. Well, are we all ready? Gloved hands twirled a rose in intricate patterns. You bet. Guys. This time we'll do even better than before. As should be clear already, this was Team Rocket. And, before, was when they completed their last successful mission. They stole a sleeping Caterpie. Not much, but better than they ever get around Ash, that's for sure. So many injured Pokémon, all of them for the taking. This was such a good plan. What? Ambulance chasing? James snarked. Shut up. This works. Hey. The gang members looked up to see a young boy in front of them, a Pikachu riding on his shoulder. I want a word with you. You. Talk to us. Sorry, we're far too classy for that. Ash grinned. Perhaps it'd help if I told you I know your Team Rocket members, and that you plan on stealing all the injured Pikachu that overloaded in the storm. Well, that seems about right. How dare you? James looked confused. For that matter, how does he know that? And it's not as if Meowth reveals that he can talk very often, yet this guy seems completely unsurprised. Never mind that. Get him. Aka. Thunder wave. Electricity flooded the alleyway, catching 2 humans and 3 Pokémon in its grip. Ash moved fast, lightly touching first Ekans, then Jessie, then Meowth, James and coughing. As he'd hoped, he had known them easily well enough to complete the transfer. Right. He began, even as Ekans and coughing both began to evolve. Huh. Seems like it's knowledge rather than physical training that leads to evolution. Here's the deal. I need to save the world. That is why I am back in the past, and why I have restored your memories. So, I am considering this to be a permanent truce situation, similar to all the other times the world or a large part of it has been in danger. I do, however, know that you're not going to be all that happy with the idea of just leaving off. So, every week or 3, sure, you can try an attack. But we're going to make it look good. You have evolved Pokémon with years of experience, use them. I'm not planning on being a pushover. We want this to look like you're not bumblers, but elite gangsters who are the only ones who stand a chance against me. You make it look good, so do I. We're talking about probably doing some damage to the scenery, at that. And of course any other rockets that I run across I don't hold back against in any way. You in. Nothing. Then the outer layer of Arbok's skin cracked off and she emerged from the inside with some relief. Oh. Damn. This was looking so very awesome and such, then I forgot you're still paralyzed. Jessie jerked violently and started moving again. Gah. Twerp. How could you forget that? Meowth gradually fell over, unable to correct himself with the paralysis still gripping him. James looked thoughtful. So what happens if we catch other Pokémon? If they're ones you used to have, then I'm pretty sure I can do the same to them. If not, then I'm afraid you're out of luck, you'll have to train them the old way. But I for one got best results by caring for my Pokémon. Meowth was still paralyzed. Arbok seemed concerned for a moment, then reached into Jessie's backpack and pulled out a paralysis heal. Hey, that's right. Jessie was almost bouncing on her feet. We have equipment at the moment. Back in the future we spent everything on elaborate traps, balloons and giant robots. Ash sighed. So, are you willing? Meowth looked from his human partners to their Pokémon, then shrugged, and spokey for all of them. Seems ta be the best thing ta do. Right. Oh, and James. First suggestion is to find some way to sneak that Growlithe of yours out of his kennel and onto your team, you could really do with some diversity. Oh, Growly, how could I have been so cruel as to forget you? Somehow, despite the complete ridiculousness of Team Rocket, despite their behavior, witnessing it, Ash felt like things were right again. Okay. See you in a week or so. Wait. What are we going to tell the boss? Ash turned to walk away. Just tell him that you were going to attack the Viridian Pokémon Center, but I made a preemptive strike and the chance was lost. It's technically the truth, anyway. Okay. Now, think of electricity. Think of storms, power lines, The corona around an antenna. Lightning. Everything you know that's connected to electricity. And think. Left. Left. You want to think of electricity. You want to think of left. You want the two concepts to go together, to flow into one another like they can't be separate in your mind. Now, keeping that separation there, move your paws apart again. Electricity. Left. Keep thinking that. Left. Electricity. But the other feeling isn't all electric, so you need it in both paws. Keep that pattern. Keep remembering that. And, open your eyes. Misty watched, amazed, from her side of the room as Ash coaxed Pikachu into separating the natural electric aspect of his aura from the energy itself. Pikachu's left paw was crackling with intensely yellow lightning, but the right was a shimmering azure blue. Remember how that feels, and see if you can replicate it in a minute or so. Ash stood up from his crouch. Want me to see if we can unlock yours, Misty? No thanks. I'll pass. At least until we have Brock back with us. That will hopefully lessen the number of times you have to do this. Not by much, but thanks for thinking of me. Hey, what are friends for? Behind Ash a small explosion went off. Oh for Pikachu, you're meant to do it slowly at first. You never mentioned that. Well, maybe that's because I thought it was obvious. You think going slow is obvious. True. But still. Misty lay back on her bed with a small smile. I've missed this. Morning broke on a new day in Viridian City. The travelers and their Pokémon got up, stretched, got dressed, went down for breakfast and were abruptly reminded that yesterday's events were not merely a dream, but had actually happened. Ash, after a few seconds nearly freaking out, remembered some of what Sir Aaron had taught him about emotional control. That is, recall your purpose, subordinate all to it, and nothing can sway you. That said, don't mind having fun. Sir Aaron was like that. All serious and stayed 1 minute, then playful the next. At least I'm coping better than Misty. Oh god. Oh god. We have to go through Viridian Forest. The bugs, Ash. You know how much I hate bugs. Ash stifled a grin. Wonder how Misty would take some of the Pokémon I met in Sinnoh. Would a Surskit cause her to short out? Regardless of that amusing thought, she was still a friend, so Ash resolved to put her mind at ease. For goodness sake, just teach your Staryu Power Gem or something. Or get a fire type. Ash, it should be noted, is not good at setting people at ease. You understand your duty. Yes. You know the honor that we are done. I understand. You are confident in your ability to fulfill this charge. As confident as any can be. Then go, and fair weather speed you on your way. We are lost. Ash sighed. I know. We are lost in a forest. Misty continued, twitching. Please stop. We are lost. In a forest. Full of bug-type Pokémon. I am quite proud that I have not freaked out already. Yeah, I get the point. Ash sighed again, feeling thoroughly weary despite the early hour. I'm sorry that we're lost. I'm sorry we've been in here for a week. I'm sorry that Sammy from Pallet with the Charmander passed us 4 days ago. I'm also sorry that you feel a little freaked out whenever Pikachu and I practice. Well, can you blame me? You're teaching a Pikachu the skills of a fighting type, and you're trying to learn how to infuse yourself with electricity. Even for you, this is not normal. Well, I am also working with him to help his electric attacks. Ash, you're trying to invent an electric version of Hyper Beam. Forgive me if I, a water-type gym leader, don't feel too happy about the prospect. Ash groaned, and sat down, performing another of his periodic aura sight scans of the forest, only to be surprised when a gray-green light blazed at the edge of his range. I think I see something. It looks like it's another bug type, but it's showing up more brightly than the rest were. Misty shuddered. Bugs. I don't understand. Why head towards it, if it's stronger than the others? Well, I think that those who I knew well enough to restore glow brighter, as, indeed, you did last week. Misty perked up. She hadn't minded Butterfree, it had been very nice, for a bug. And at least he'd evolved quickly. No reasonable girl could consider butterflies creepy. Nobody could. Yeah, she could handle this. Besides, Butterfree only ate fruit. Ash was already speeding through the forest. Hey, Ash, wait up. Ash was confronting a difficult moral issue. Well, most trainers wouldn't even consider it something to think about, but Ash had never been particularly usual. Should I try to beat Caterpie like last time, so that it's not just pathetic and vaguely sad, or should I get it over with by just having Pikachu use Thunder Wave? Hey, that might work. Pikachu, mind firing a Thunder Wave at him as soon as I can point him out? No need. I remember his scent. At Ash's look of confusion, Pikachu elaborated. I was a wild Pokémon, and anyway, humans have among the worst senses of smell of any creature I can think of. It may not be on the level of odor sleuth, but smelling things out is a survival skill out here. Ash felt vaguely uneasy, as he often did when this sort of topic came up. I don't really feel comfortable when you casually mention the prospect of death, especially yours. You know I care for you. I know. But if it helps, intelligence is a survival skill too. Most of the Pokémon that people actually see are the smarter ones, living in the areas closer to humanity and understanding that the strange non-Pokémon aren't all evil, or giants or whatever. That said, I would rather be with you than anywhere else. You know that. Thanks, buddy. That means a lot to me. That's why I reminded you. Now, then, there. Yellow, jagged arcs of lightning flashed from the mouse's body, surrounding and immobilizing a certain Caterpie among six on a nearby tree. Ash momentarily closed one eye. Yep, that's him all right. What do you plan on doing? Ash grinned, asking politely. The trainer walked over to the little bug, and gently touched his antenna. A spark of blue flashed at the contact, light filled the clearing. And Butterfree flew off the trunk. Hello again, Ash. Okay. What the hell? Misty had arrived. Is everyone polyglot these days but me? You're hearing Pikachu and Butterfree, right? Yeah. But still, I thought you had to train a Pokémon in Aura at least somewhat before that happened. I'm already psychic. Butterfree generally are. Not sure why. Okay. So what now? Do you want to have a battle? I dunno, feel like things are being done properly, or just have me catch you? Ash asked. I think a battle. I haven't had the chance to show off in a while. Okay. Now, in accordance with ancient custom, leg it, Misty. The humans dived behind trees just before the blast of a bug buzz and a thunder colliding in midair, sending a rain of leaves towards the dirt. I don't remember your Butterfree being this strong, Ash. Misty called to him from her tree. Overhead Butterfree began weaving in a complex pattern, moving faster with each motion, glowing with power. Pikachu, not one to miss a trick, began charging, further boosting the effect with some of his electric aura. He was strong enough to impress an entire swarm, and he's been presumably protecting them for 5 years. I have no clue what he can manage. So, what's that? It looks new. Butterfree didn't cease the looping dance. It's Butterfly Dance, a special technique that relies on repetition to energize the scales. Like it. Pikachu grinned. This was part of what made him follow Ash. The general strength of every one of his Pokémon, you knew you could rely on any of them, and even the boy himself, no matter what. But enough of that. I bet you noticed the problem I have with this elemental matchup, being part flying type. Well, I have a solution. The sun burst through the light cloud cover, forcing Pikachu to squint into the sunlight and throwing off his aim. He wasn't yet good enough to just use Aura Sight instead, and he knew what the sunlight might mean apart from that. Brilliant. Incoming solar beam, and I can't even make agility afterimages to dodge, he'll spot the real one in seconds. Ah well, improvisation is the name of the game. Iron Tail. Butterfree opened fire. The solar beam didn't even need to charge, simply lensing the sunlight already in the air into a scorching beam of laser-like light. He was understandably surprised when it bounced back. Surprised, but no more. The attack was almost nothing against him. But the distraction did allow Pikachu to use his high speed to close in on Butterfree, jumping from trunk to branch to crown and into the air. So you know a few tricks. So do I. This one's called the counter shield. Butterfree found himself enveloped in a cage of lightning, one centered on the electric mouse. It was one of the genuine innovations Ash and his team had developed in the future. Interesting. One assumes that this means I can't leave. Butterfree was impressed. The level of control required for this sort of thing was nothing to sneeze at, as this function alone was a whole new trapping move. Sorry. Unless you want to be electrocuted. But a battle's a battle. Damn it. I'm going to have to follow you down, then. I hate it when my opponents are clever. Don't be like that. Now, Pikachu continued as the two Pokémon dropped back to the forest floor, the electric fence preventing Butterfree from getting the distance he preferred. Here's another new one. The Volt Tackle. The fence shrank to a narrow path, with Pikachu at one end and Butterfree at the other. Do hold still. Not something I'm planning on, my old friend. Butterfree flapped his wings, and the spores and powders of Stun Spore, Sleep Powder and Potion Powder filled the tunnel. I'm not giving up. Not while I can still fight. Pikachu quirked an eyebrow as the counter shield spawned a second layer across his fur. That's supposed to be effective. Electricity can burn things. So, that incinerates the spores. Brilliant. My luck hasn't improved. I thought you were living the dream. Powerful, important, and with a great mate. Butterfree shrugged. Still true. Yellow aura flared as Pikachu began his charge. Butterfree's antenna twitched irritably. And now you have superpowers. Anything else I missed? The entire clearing lit up with a mighty explosion, and scorch marks from errant lightning appeared on the trees, as the overloaded Volt Tackle ended the fight in the trademark style of those trained by Ash. Neither of them could move anymore. Fill you in on the whole save the world thing later. Ash, did Pikachu just use Iron Tail to bounce back a solar beam? Misty asked, not quite trusting her own eyes. Yes, he did, Ash replied. Oh, I thought I'd check. I think that from now on, I'm merely training them, mused Ash, if they're this good without me shouting my head off at them in actual battle. With a thump, a large bird landed next to them, and after a quick check Ash walked over to it. Yep, it was Pidgeotto. Ash had forgotten the two had been caught so close together. Well, at least blind luck is on my side sometimes. Ash had a tearful reunion with Pidgeot, apologizing profusely for leaving her for so long in the pallet area without ever coming to visit. He'd felt guilty for over a week, ever since being reminded and coming back, and was glad to know that no hard feelings existed. Though he was slightly scared at the sheer power she too had developed, protecting an entire forest for years. He had to talk her down from showing off with a tornado. So, what's next? Ash looked over from where he was applying medicine to Pikachu and Butterfree. How so? Well, last time we were stuck in here for a good few weeks, but if we retrace our path not only is it annoying but we miss the Cameron Castle appointment you wanted to make. Ash nodded, already planning on what to do next. I think we'll be ready for Brock's gym in a couple of days. We'll handle that bug samurai guy and get going. Pikachu's getting better at aura control, at least. Since Pikachu was still unable to generate untyped aura straight off, Ash had been having Pikachu practice splitting it into the electric and untyped and then attacking with the two alternately. Since the Force Palm was essentially the most basic aura attack there was, blasting a pulse of aura without attempting to shape it or maintain coherency, this was a relatively quick solution that worked. And won't it be a surprise? Ash himself was also engaged in practicing, of a different sort. He knew he'd been able to pull almost unreasonably large amounts of aura before, and not being able to do so could be seen as a weak spot. So he was trying to teach himself the ability to harness his emotions, using them as a catalyst without letting them affect his behavior. It wasn't going well. At least once he'd pulled up that same thrill of power, but it had been while he was too angry at his own slow progress to notice, only Misty's shout letting him know that he was starting to crack the tree he was sitting against. So, Ash mused, where is that samurai person anyway? Are you from Pallet Town? Right. And he's even more of an idiot than I remember. Not only is he asking Misty, who's pretty clearly from Cerulean Gym once you know to look, she's more like her sisters than she thinks, but he's going to end up challenging someone with a Pidgeot. Honor. Actually, she isn't. That would be me, Ash Ketchum of the town of Pallet. Ash smiled at the in-joke. Aha. Then I must challenge you, just as I did the others from that town who passed through here. Ash sighed. Okay. Did you happen to notice a trend? First there was the Bulbasaur. Easy. Then the Squirtle. Harder. Then the Charmander. Nearly impossible for a bug trainer to beat. And now you want to fight someone who has 2 fully evolved Pokémon and a Pikachu, in a clearing with gigantic scorch marks all over it from a Volt Tackle. That is irrelevant. The diminutive, Ronin proclaimed. Samurai do not shy from battle. Ash turned to his Pokémon. Which of you wants to handle it? Butterfree flapped excitedly. I call the Pinsir. And I'll settle my old score with his Metapod. Pidgeot's translated voice was, surprisingly for such a large Pokémon, a cool soprano, but with the slightest hint of steel beneath it. Let Pikachu rest for a while. Fair enough. Battle on 3. Yes. I must redeem my honor by defeating at least one of the Pallet Town trainers. Good. You agree. Ash gestured Pidgeot forward. Misty, call it in if you would. Sure. 1, 2, 3. We draw a veil over the scenes of indescribable carnage. No. How could I be so shamefully unskilled? The samurai asked plaintively, slumped in the ruin that was once a small forest clearing. Ash felt kinda bad. It's more that I have certain advantages, put it that way. Don't feel bad about it, just improve and do better next time. And perhaps get more diverse bugs, like a Scyther, or Scizor for that matter, that'd be a great help. I understand. The boy smiled shyly. And sorry for going on like that, I felt so sure I could win once. Is everyone from Pallet Town this strong? I like to think I'm the best, but since Professor Oak lives there that may not be accurate. I see. His voice firmer now, the young samurai got to his feet. Then I hope that when you pass through again, we have both improved enough that our match is more even. Of course, this means I'll have to improve a lot more than you. Don't sweat it. I'm sure you'll do fine. Thank you. Ash and the samurai parted on relatively good terms, in fact, despite the ever so slightly one-sided defeat. Though it wasn't until Ash and Misty were setting up camp for the night that Ash thought about the moral issues with leaving the boy in range of a major beedrill swarm. Ah well, wasn't as if he was unskilled with bugs, and presumably he knew how to handle it. Okay. Left, right, keep up the separation. Ash barked out orders at his sweating Pokémon, refusing to delay the trip through Viridian Forest more on account of any laziness, real or perceived, in Pikachu's training. For goodness sake I'm trying, Ash. Thwack. Then try harder. You need to keep the separation up, that's why you're hitting a rock now not a tree, so you can tell which one's having the effect. Thud. And it's not easy to concentrate on 2 things at once. Thwack. You think I don't know that? Thud. Of course. Concentrating on one thing is such a step up for you that 2 doesn't seem too hard in comparison. Thwack. Well, excuse me for trying to find a way to actually earn the Butter Badge. Thud. Why not just use Butterfree? Thwack. Because the gym's indoors. Nowhere to get the power for a solar beam. Thud. Misty blinked as the friends devolved into a shouting match. Pikachu was still punching the rock as hard as he could. I will never understand boys. Pidgeot chirped softly in agreement. Damn it, Ash. You can be so stubborn. Pikachu's blue-sheathed fist smacked into the boulder, which cracked in 2. The 2 stopped their arguing as if a switch had been thrown. Did that just work? I think so. They both stared at the smashed rock in some disbelief, until the halves fell over. Ash exulted. Yes. Take that. Rock and ground types. At last, the dream of Pikachu all over the world is coming to fruition. Don't you know Iron Tail? Pikachu waved his paw dismissively. It's not nearly as good. Gives you a real ache in the tailbone. Have you ever tried swinging a 3-kilo weight by your pinky? Because that's what it feels like. My tail is pretty narrow at the base. Okay. Do you want to start learning the next one? Aura SP, Pikachu was already asleep. Or you could get some rest, that works too. Mountains ahead. Quickest route is through the pass to the west. It is inhabited. I must use stealth to avoid being spotted. There are too many to avoid being seen in some way. There is a cloak. That will do. A cloaked stranger passed through the sleepy village of Otama, maintaining distance from everyone, as if, perhaps, afraid of what they might do. A few people tried to follow this mysterious cloaked figure, but the figure fluidly avoided the net closing around them and disappeared over the fence at the edge of the village proper. When the curious villagers followed, they found only the cloak, hooked carefully over a gatepost. There you go. Pidgeot flared her wings, dismissing the altered air around her form, and gently glided to alight at Pewter City limits. Thanks, Pidgeot. Ash slid off the huge avian's back as she stopped. Ash's Pidgeot was a marvelous specimen of the species, at least in part due to her years of training and experience having a chance to express right from the get-go in the evolution. It was easy for her to convey Ash and Misty to the outskirts of Pewter City at a mere 100 miles an hour, diverting the wind around them to make for a smooth and comfortable flight. It had been one of several measures planned to ensure that the timing all worked out. Now, onto Brock's gym. Oh, sorry, guys, I think that in town I'll have to have you in your Pokeballs. They won't mind Pikachu, but an 8-foot bird of prey is something else. Sorry again. We don't mind, Ash. It's good that you do what you can. Thanks, that sets my mind at rest. Pewter City was an interesting place. Largely a mining town at first, it had developed into a center of culture with its Museum of Science and Nature, its position on the main route north out of Kanto and, of course, one of the league gyms. Guess which one Ash was interested in? Alright, time to get started again on becoming a Pokemon master. Misty shook her head as Ash charged off towards the Pewter gym. Some people. Pewter wasn't particularly big. Ash was barely even-winded when he reached the home of the Butterbadge. Alright, I'm here to challenge this gym. Are you? Well, hello then. Name's Brock. And I assume that you're not going to fight with that Pikachu. Actually, I am. I feel confident in his abilities, replied Ash, laughter dancing in his eyes. Well, it's your choice, Brock said dubiously, so go ahead. Sure thing. Mind if we shake before the match? Not at all. It's nice to see someone with manners for once. That kid with the Squirtle. Ash grinned. Yep. That's Gary all right. You know him. Can you explain to me what was with the car? Ash shook his head. Nobody knows. Brock shrugged. Oh well. Never mind. They shook, and a spark of blue light flashed in the darkness of the gym. Ah. What just happened? Ash. And, what? I'll explain later. For now, we have a battle to get through. Brock nodded. Go. Marshtomp. Nothing happened. At all. Brock just kept trying to grab a Pokeball that wasn't there. It was actually kind of embarrassing. Brock, we've gone back in time. Ash pulled his head back up out of his hands. You only have the Pokemon that you have now, when we first met, but they should be as strong as you remember. Brock nodded. I see. This has interesting implications. Well, go Geodude then. Pikachu. The mouse nodded. I know what to do. Pikachu squared off against Geodude, the latter hovering gently in the air. Last time, both knew, the battle had been resolved by abuse of Pikachu's Lightning Rod ability in a hydroelectric power plant. Not this time. Geodude. Sandstorm. I was hoping he wouldn't do that. Pikachu flickered into the air, agility accelerating his speed relative to his already slow foe. A sandstorm couldn't blow in every direction at once, and Pikachu was able to move fast enough to prevent his foe targeting correctly. Geodude angrily shouted something along the lines of, "Stand still so I can hit you." No. This isn't getting anywhere. Dig. Dude. The rocky Pokemon disappeared into the floor. Hey, won't you have trouble? Pikachu's on the roof. Ash. This is bad. Pikachu commented urgently. Brock isn't an idiot unless women are involved. Good point. Ash closed his eyes, and gasped. Pikachu. The walls are rock too. Sneaky little thing. Pikachu dropped from the roof just before the rock type burst from it, and had to use quick attack to get out from under a seismic toss. It's a fight you want, it's a fight you get. Iron Tail. Mega Punch. Geodude. The two clashed, rock arm against metal tail. Pikachu was sent flying, but managed to recover with another burst of quick attack and somersaulted back towards the rock type. Try to catch him in a seismic toss. I am so glad Ash released me to act on my own initiative, otherwise this would seem stupid. Pikachu dodged, but not wide enough. He deliberately aimed so he would pass Geodude, but not so he'd be entirely out of reach. Pikachu. Oh, that's right, I forgot to let Ash know. Ah well. Geodude had made a mistake. Pikachu was facing away from the rock type in the grip, and he still had his iron tail up. As the seismic toss windup progressed, Pikachu slapped Geodude in the face with his metallic tail as fast as he could. His promptness paid off, as Geodude lost his grip shortly before hitting the floor and Pikachu just managed to escape the falling Pokémon. Wow. Not bad, Ash. You've really improved. It's all Pikachu's improvement, thanks. I trained him. No more. So, you did well against Geodude, but how will you manage against Onix? Go. Brock's Steelix roared his power to the heavens. Yeah, that happens too, Ash called from the side. They evolved to whatever they were. Oh, well, you're in even more trouble now. Steelix. Dragon Breath. Oh, crap. Well, let's try this thing. The counter shield sprang up around Pikachu, forming a dense net of lightning bolts. It barely slowed the attack, but by then Pikachu was out of the way with agility and onto the roof again. He dropped down from there into the center of Steelix coils. Brock began to chuckle. Are you sure you're feeling alright? That's not the smartest move you could do. 1. The yellow wreathed punch fizzled out on the steel snake. Brock snorted with laughter. Ha! No luck with that Thunder Punch. Pikachu doesn't know Thunder Punch. Ash grinned in triumph. 2. The blue wreathed force palm strike lifted the Steelix bodily into the air and blasted him across the huge artificial cavern, sending the limp body up against the wall and clearly out of the fight. He has recently learned force palm, though. Brock looked stunned. So, the fight with Geodude, it was all an act to make Steelix overconfident. Pre-TTY much, yeah. Ash rubbed the back of his head. I feel sorry for you, actually. I mean, we had to trick you to beat you. You probably would have won somehow anyway, Ash. Brock said solemnly. I remember the Indigo League, and you were the one who competed, not I. And the same later on. Brock reminisced for a moment, then became more businesslike. So, is there a slot still open on your journey? Suppose so. Any idea if your dad is around? I think he is. He said he used to watch me between coming back and admitting it. But we'll never catch him at it. Ash smirked, closed his eyes for a second, and pointed out the window. Pikachu. Thunder Wave. Well, Misty said brightly, at least that's sorted out. It wasn't very nice of Flint to leave you alone for so long, Brock, but now you get your own chance for adventure. Ash nodded, the three friends heading north for the mountains and the town of Rhoda. They had picked up the Pokédex uplink that the professor had sent ahead for them at the Pokémon Center, and Ash had also found a short message on his rarely used mail account. 6,935,164 JJMAW. The three were still discussing what it meant. And now, we have about 5 days before we're scheduled to go through MT. Moon. Since, unlike the other cases, a Pokémon could die if we're too late to get to Charmander, I want us to delay as little as possible. In other words, Brock, is Steelix recovered enough for us to ride on him? Ah, I think so. We're headed for Cameron. Yes, I have business there. Now, any problems with that? Not at all. Brock's eyes began to glow. Especially with Queen Eileen. Oh, my sweet. Bam. Misty picked up Brock from where she'd smacked him into the floor, with her Goldeen. Don't start this again, Brock, or we will make a special trip to Sinnoh to find your Krogunk. He could keep you in line. My devotion is only overshadowed by my pain. This time it was Ash's turn to grin at the bickering. This is what I would never give up. No matter what. Companions. 2 days later, Ash, Brock and Misty were walking the last mile or so to along the small kingdom's only link with the outside world, a tree-lined path through the mountains. Ash checked their surrounds, and froze. Guys, trouble. Aura. Strong one, coming up on the path ahead. No, not quite. He covered one eye with his palm and opened the other. The aura's moving through the trees at crown level, really fast. We could be in major trouble here. The shape blurred across the woods towards them, stopped for a moment high in a tree 100 yards away, then flashed towards the group, aimed directly at Ash. The boy yelped in shock and crossed his arms, the weak flicker of his protect stopping the assailant from knocking him down, but the force of the blow still left him sliding back into a tree. The strange form wasn't done yet. Disdaining the other humans and batting aside the attack sent its way by an only now reacting Pikachu, still moving so fast that all anyone could catch was a vague sense of blue and black. Ash's mind was working faster than it ever had, as he flooded his entire nervous system with aura to boost it. What the hell? That was one strong blow, and I expect, whoever this is going to deliver more. What's going on? Sir Aaron had taught him one simple tactic for facing faster, more skilled, more powerful opponents. Don't. Bit late to apply that here. Okay, based on the force of that blow I think I can take one if I don't mind a few bad bruises on the hands, and possibly a broken arm. Joy. In both senses of the word. Ah well. Needs must. As the foe blurred in, Ash's still active aura sight revealed to him that the next blow, like the first, was a punch, along with where the overly telegraphed, wound-up blow was going. So he caught it. Ash's friends heard a sickening crack, not really seeing the source as the entire battle thus far had taken a bare few seconds. They hadn't quite realized what was going on at first. The pain was intense, and the feel in his arm was that of at least a hairline fracture, but that didn't matter at all. Not at this moment of clarity. Visible blue aura arced from the catching left hand, around Ash's back, growing all the time, and flooded the right as Ash swung an even more powerful haymaker at his stalled attacker's side. Counter. Something gave slightly at the impact. The blow seemed to have knocked it for a loop, as it flew off to the side a little before skidding to a halt by braking with both hands, and with the blur of speed from the agility gone its identity was clear. A Lucario. As Ash steadied himself and everyone else looked on in shock, the Pokémon kneeled to Ash, before gripping its upper body for a moment. Greetings, Chosen One, and ouch. Her voice transposed itself via the basic aura trick into a comprehensible alto tone, wavering slightly as she prodded her ribs. I should not have doubted your ability. Ash was pained and confused, and angry. Why did you attack me? And for that matter, why aren't you now? What's going on? Yeah, what he said. Misty weighed in. My apologies. I have been given a task, the accomplishment of which requires that I identify the chosen of Aaron's line. Since the line has been dormant for a millennium, I was skeptical of your ability to handle the task I must now transfer to you, and I was overeager with my test. I forgot, sorry to say, about the frailty of humans. Nevertheless, what you have done is more than proof that you can accomplish what I will ask of you, on behalf of my kingdom. What the hell? Ash cradled his injured left forearm. Why on earth you thought that was a reasonable test escapes me. You could have killed someone. It could have been me, had I not managed that protect. You exaggerate. I aimed for extremities, and not to cause too much lasting damage. Besides, the Pokémon centers can heal humans as well, can they not? RRGH. I suppose it's excusable, if the task is as important as you imply, and I'm not convinced on that front yet. I still wish you'd waited until this evening though. What is it, then? The jackal-like Pokémon flickered over to the tree she had stopped at before, and returned in seconds, holding a small over-the-shoulder bag. Setting the bag down, she knelt again. Ash Ketchum of Palette, will you accept this charge? To educate in the ways of aura. To keep morality, and to ensure the same of your charge. To protect those weaker than yourself, with all the breath you have in your body. If you swear, then we beg you accept this scion of our noblest line as an apprentice and companion. While Ash and Misty were looking confused and Brock incredulous, He'd worked it out already. The Lucario drew back the strings of the bag to reveal an egg. Wow. I mean, just, wow. I can hardly credit it. That they think this highly of me. Ash and his friends had withdrawn a short distance to let Ash get over his shock, deal with his broken arm. They had Butterfree douse it in sleep powder as anesthetic, and then locked up the arm's muscles using a thunder wave to hold the break until they could access the services of Rota Pokémon Center and discuss the next step. Brock nodded. She said they heard from the Suicune from these parts. I assume that the Ho-Oh you met has been doing some groundwork in the last week or two. Well, you heard the question, Ash. Want to accept? Want to? Ash raised his head. Yes, so much it hurts. I'm still, at heart, the little boy who wants to have cool Pokémon, and likely always will be. But I don't know if I can. It's a dangerous life I lead, and not one to accept a baby into lightly. Even a Riolu. I feel like I couldn't guarantee its safety. She didn't ask for safety, just that you do all you can. Ash, stop being like, well, you, and accept. It's a great honor, and I think it's the very reason that Sir Aaron had a Lucario as a companion, why Riley does, probably the reason behind Steven's Metagross, as well. Pikachu then gave a small grin. Besides, you handled Phanpy, Larvitar and Gible well enough when you looked after them. It's not the same. Before, I just blundered into trouble, and now I'm actively seeking it out. And 10 minutes ago you cracked the rib of a steel type. You're not the same either, Ash. Have a little faith in yourself for once. Ash wasn't sure. Not about something of this magnitude. Things were going to get fast-paced, perhaps too fast-paced, and it would be too dangerous. But with every one of his friends encouraging him, Ash relented. He wasn't infallible, after all, and maybe they had more faith in him, rightly, than he was willing to give himself. And if the members of a society based on honor felt him ready for this, then maybe he should trust their judgment. Then he thought, hadn't Sir Aaron, hadn't anyone who raised Pokémon before the Meiji for that matter, brought them up in an environment of chaos and war? Compared to that, this was small stuff, and the Lucario Kingdom knew it. Time to take the plunge. He got up and walked over to the patiently waiting Lucario messenger. All right, I'll do it. I swear. Thank you, Chosen. She reverently drew out the egg and handed it to him, making sure he had a good grip. He did. Despite the injured left arm, Ash had often carried eggs before. Now, it should hatch in a few months, so, what the? A familiar white glow suffused their stretch of path, and when it faded, instead of the egg, a Riolu was cradled in Ash's arms. Ash, meanwhile, was overwhelmed with a rush of sensation. Lab attack captured escape hurt friend close friend aura attacked again frozen stolen. Rescued. Ash looked down with tears glistening in the corners of his eyes, and shifted the young Pokémon to a better grip in both hands. No. I don't believe it. No way am I this lucky. Believe in the evidence of your eyes and the light of our spirits. It's me. Hello again, friend Ash. Ash's legs gave out and he collapsed to his knees, still holding the Riolu up by the shoulders. I think I must have really impressed someone up there. Of course you did, Riolu stated, with unshakable confidence. It's you. Can someone please tell me what is happening? The Lucario messenger asked, confused. Ash put his new charge down, wincing at the effect the strain had had on his arm. As you may or may not have been told, one of the talents I possess, thanks to confusing situations involving time travel, Ash grimaced. He'd been getting headaches trying to understand it himself, is that if I encounter a human or Pokémon I had some bond with, met often, that sort of thing, I can restore their memories of the future that was. And by the most incredible good fortune, the egg you conveyed to me, had this all not happened, would have hatched into one of the guardians of the kingdom, trained to use aura while still a Riolu. I would have met him in about 4 years, I think, and saved him from Hunter J, a Pokémon kidnapper. Even then, with no training on my part, our auras resonated enough that I could feel some of his emotions, and find him with the sight. Well, That's both the most unorthodox and fastest way of fulfilling the teaching criterion I've ever heard of. Ash was grinning, barely visibly, struggling to contain his emotions. And it puts paid to my thoughts about danger, at least. Right now, he's better than me. You know it. Well, I suppose, thanks. Even if I don't approve of your methods in testing me, Ash rubbed his paralyzed forearm again, at least it's set your mind at rest for the future. I thank you for understanding. Fare thee well, Ash Ketchum. She fell back into her agility technique and raced off to the north. Well, that was strange. Strange things happen. Riolu. Ash's Riolu, he thought with a little thrill, was climbing onto his left shoulder. True. Now, onto Cameron Castle. Wow, we're going there. Riolu perked up. I never got to go there before. That's where Sir Aaron lived, isn't it? He was amazing. He's an inspiration to Riolu and Lucario everywhere, because he was known to wield the powers of aura as well as any of us despite being a mere human. He suddenly remembered who he was sitting on. No offense meant. So long as I can put you in a little red ball whenever I really want to, I won't take any. Ash chuckled. Meanie. And yes, we are. Though it's for more than one reason. A tournament. I won't ask you to participate if you don't want to, but more than that, there's something I want to collect. Ooh. What? Pikachu climbed onto the other shoulder. It's his inheritance, of sorts. Aaron's gloves and staff. Riolu looked at Ash like he was a ghost. You what? What's the problem? You didn't mention that. How can you inherit something from Sir Aaron? Hey, give me a break. I only found out a couple weeks ago that I'm descended from him. Hell, even he didn't mention it. The young Pokemon's eyes were spinning. You met him. Time travel, a quest, legendaries everywhere and by mighty Arceus, and because of him, and his little Dialga too, my life is bizarre. I'll explain on the road. Meanwhile, somewhere in a really rather nice district of Kanto. An anguished voice rang out. Oh God. No. That's James's voice. What happened? Well, whatever it is, it doesn't sound good. Jesse turned to the two poison types in the basket. Arbok. Get the balloon ready. Cha. The serpent wound up the ropes supporting the basket and began to prepare the burner. Arbok have very dexterous tails. Good thought. Jesse. Meowth said. Now, what's happening down our road? Jesse and Meowth squinted. I think I see something. Meowth nodded. Looks like there's definitely something coming towards us. Jessie exclaimed, pleased with her deduction. Yeah, and it looks like it's a person, quite tall, running alongside a canine quadrupedal Pokémon. Help, please. Hey, I recognize that voice from somewhere. Meowth muttered. I think I do too. Now, who could it be? For goodness sake, you complete idiots. The mysterious figure roared. Throw me the damn fire stone. Oh, now I remember. It's James. Jessie thought about that for half a second, blanched upon realizing that Jessibelle was likely just behind him, and threw the liberated elemental stone with about as much skill as one could expect from someone in a rocking balloon 20 feet up. Who only threw perfectly round Pokeballs little more than a foot or two at a time. James saw the abysmal toss and pointed at it, calling, Growly, fetch. James's faithful puppy leapt into the air, swallowed the stone in one gulp, and changed. The Shisa, the fiery arcanine that James's little puppy had become, skidded to a halt, crouched to allow its trainer to climb on, and shot off into the morning mist at ridiculous speed. Even though she was still convinced that her betrothed was not getting away for long, Jessibelle had to admit, that took some beating as an exit. Her backup plan to deal with his friends in the balloon was likewise stymied by the mist, haze, smog, smokescreen. Smokescreen James's wheezing was laying down from the basket. Right. Next time screw subtle, it's straight to the helicopters. And if that doesn't work, I think I still have Hunter J's number, and James will do anything for that pet of his. As the group of friends left the Rota Pokemon Center, Ash swinging his recently healed arm, they were accosted by a man in the muted regalia of a minor official, holding a clipboard. Welcome to the town of Rota, the site of Cameron Palace. Today we have the annual tournament of arms before the Queen. I understand that you're one of those who registered to compete. Ash nodded. Yep. But everyone else is wearing wonderful old costumes. I feel kinda out of place. Mind if I see if there's something I can put on? I mean, this is the first I heard of the theme. Understandable. He made a tick on his clipboard. There's a dressing room in the palace, on the second floor. You have about 2 hours before the tournament starts. It's full of old outfits that nobody's claimed, should be a good place to look. But remember to check next time, young man. Got it. Let's go. Guys. Ash and friends walked off towards the castle, the orderly they'd left behind looking faintly confused. I thought Riolu were native only to Sinnoh and West Johto. Ash was excited. More than that, he was excited and with someone else who was excited, for a slightly different reason. Riolu wanted to see everything he could about the place one of the greatest heroes of the country had lived in, so long ago. Brock and Misty were getting a little tired of Ash bouncing off the walls in excitement. Oh, come on. It's the tournament. It's going to be amazing. I've looked forward to this for weeks. And is that a painting of the Battle of Crane Wing, where Sir Aaron challenged the entire enemy high command to single combat at once and then didn't even bother to get out a weapon? Pikachu rubbed his long ears and sighed. Please quieten down. You too, I have sensitive ears. And you're not off the hook, Riolu. Just because this little aura trick provides translation does not make you any less loud. Ash was briefly contrite, before spotting the door to the dressing room and jogging ahead to it. Now, where is it? The room was full of costumes, not all of them from the past. Ash saw there was a spacesuit in there, complete with the holsters for Pokeballs and the embossed warning only to use primary steel types, as they often were incapable of depressurization due to lack of breathing in the first place. Not that Ash paid much attention to it, Riolu and Pikachu jumping off his shoulders to aid his frantic search. He was so close, the anticipation was almost painful. Found it. Brilliant. Ash moved over to where Pikachu was, and stared for almost half a minute at the complete set of clothes, pristine and waiting. Well, he started. Yeah, sorry. Ash took the outfit and moved on into the changing room. The next few minutes were quite an experience. The main body of the outfit was perfectly normal, apart from being surprisingly tough for its weight, but the rest, every single accessory bar none, had some important or useful purpose. First, the boots. They pulsed for a moment, questing for their wearer's aura, then apparently accepted Ash's and drew for a second. Then it was as if Ash was suddenly about 10 kilos lighter. He could feel a little mental switch, somewhere in the back of his mind, controlling the amount of aura sent to the boots. Presumably they could be left off until needed, so that the body didn't atrophy, or perhaps reversed. It would be like the old trick of training while wearing weights. Then there was the pouch. It likewise tested Ash, drew for a moment, and went inert. But upon opening it, Ash found that it was huge, bigger by far than the exterior, and full to the brim with useful items, kits and what felt like a full set of notes in neat notebooks. Already, this alone was more precious than gold. The private notes of an aura adept would aid Ash immensely. Even a week solid in training hadn't let him learn all that the ancient knight could remember, let alone his more difficult to recall techniques, tweaks and perhaps useful knowledge of other sorts. The cape had its own purpose as well, and when Ash put it on he could feel a tingling about his collar as it recognized the wearer's awakened aura and began pushing ambient aura on its master's frequency into him, providing a gradual recharge for Ash and Sir Aaron and presumably rendering any adept thief unable to properly control their aura with what would to them be a taint. Ingenious design, really. After the last three, Ash was almost nervous about the hat, but put it on anyway. There didn't seem to be anything different, though there was the normal probe, except, draw, then nothing. Ash. A trickle of thought came across from his mental connection to Riolu, only noticeable because the Pokémon was on the other side of a door, and his voice wasn't audible. What? Your aura just dimmed. Not much, but noticeably. Huh. Interesting. Maybe the notes will explain it. Oh, I'll have a lot of late nights with those. Now it was down to the final item, the gloves. The gloves were sized perfectly, as indeed everything else had been, despite the 5-year difference with last time it had been worn. Or the fact that neither time had Ash been in full growth, and Sir Aaron clearly had been. Probably more strange uses for aura. Ooh wow. That feels very nice. Ash had drawn the gloves up his arms, and they had promptly begun resonating with his aura, the stones on them building up a charge that was connected to his reserves, the charge being drawn from his ambient leakage. They effectively meant both that he did not lose aura to the environment unless the glove reservoirs were full and that his immediately available pool had grown massively, and closed up the envelope of his frequency too, boosting his precision. Before they'd amplified him to the point he could manipulate aura untrained. Now he felt like he could take on anything. That might just be tested soon. As Ash left the changing room, he was faced with Pikachu explaining the events of the last time their group had been to the castle. The story of an ancient warrior, a message from the past, human greed, and a noble sacrifice. Wow. Riolu breathed. So you're saying that you actually met Sir Aaron's student, and the Mew of the Tree of Beginning, and went inside it. That's amazing. You must have been just stunned. Pikachu scratched the back of his head awkwardly. We didn't really view it that way, to be honest. I mean, if we're talking weird and wonderful, there's the time we met the legendary birds responsible for the Orange Island's climate, or the massive duel between Groudon and Kyogre, or the time Ash got possessed, or the time I got possessed by Groudon, or perhaps when I vanished from existence for a few seconds because of nearly 5,000 years of time all but being cancelled out. Riolu stared at Pikachu. You people, that thing with Hunter J wasn't anything special for you, was it? Ash butted in. It was a bit unusual. That was a slow week. I can hardly credit it. Ash stormed around the salon in a black mood. Calm down, Ash, it's not that bad. Where did they even get a ghost ground type? That's not fair. Issue. Dexter butted in. It's a golem Pokémon, called Gorago. I think they call it Golurk. Though even I think the ability to punch out Pidgeot when she's 100 feet up was just unfair. Still, third place. Not bad at all, Ash. Misty tried. We're so very coming back next year. With more team members to handle ridiculous immunities. Ash gave up his pacing, and slumped down onto a chair. But yeah, I get the point. When's that audience? Good thing I got to talk to her after the third, fourth playoff to arrange that. You should set off in 10 minutes. Okay. Probably better get going now then. Brock, mind coming with me? I mean, I'm 10 after all. Yeah, sure. Don't want it to seem like you're a kid playing dress up, do we? That and he wants to see the queen. Ash's Pokemon entered, Butterfree gripping a Pokeball that was presumably Pidgeot's. Oh. Hey guys. You all healed up? Yes. But next time please make sure that our foe isn't that nasty. Won't be a problem, you'll learn foresight. Right. Riolu blinked, then his eyes flickered red briefly. Well damn. I completely forgot about that. Oh, for goodness sake. Ash Ketchum of Pallet Town, his 2 Pokemon, and Brock of Pewter to see you, milady. Queen Eileen turned to the door. Ah, I was expecting them. Thank you. Ash, Brock, and Pikachu and Riolu walked into the audience chamber. Ash knelt briefly, remembering a little of the etiquette crash course Sir Aaron had tried while Ash was concentrating on drawing out power. Ma'am, I have something important to discuss. She gestured for him to rise. Then get to it. No need to stand on ceremony. Ash began to feel this might actually go well. Okay. First thing is, did you know that this outfit I'm wearing is more than a replica of Sir Aaron's clothes, but is in fact the genuine article? Or articles, I suppose, since it's clothing. The Queen of Cameron arched an eyebrow. Indeed. And how is it that this has not been noticed? Many Aura adepts have visited the castle in the 2,000 years since his death, and none of them have said anything. Ash smiled weakly. The special properties of the outfit only activate when worn by someone of an identical Aura signature. Like mine. I've recently discovered I'm his descendant. Queen Eileen nodded, this not seeming to surprise her. But then, an integral part of her palace was crystals from a ridiculously vast supernatural tree made out of rock, so perhaps this was fairly mundane. Ash hadn't considered that maybe other people also had the crazy kind of love-hate relationship with luck that he had. Anyway, I'd like to, I suppose, take these with me. I could say they're my inheritance. I could say that they're not doing much good where they are. I could say they'll help me save people, but since I've just made all those points, I'm going to mention something else. That staff, the tournament grand prize, contains, frozen in stasis, Sir Aaron's companion Lucario. The moment the two took their eyes off it, Brock picked it up and started looking at the quality of the crystals, unsuccessfully trying to distract himself from the queen. Since he's been in stasis since before the Yamato period, he's probably going to mistake me for him and not know about the whole heroic sacrifice thing. So we need to be able to deal with him in a calm environment. And, what is it, Pikachu? Pikachu stopped tugging on Ash's ear and pointed at Brock. That teen was practically vibrating in place, staring at the queen. Ah, the vision of loveliness is one I can no longer ignore. Brock threw aside the staff he was carrying and rushed towards the queen, arms outstretched. Hermione Jr. promptly tripped him, being used to amorous visitors, but that wasn't the problem. The problem was that Ash had reflexively caught the staff as it sailed towards him. And it was glowing. Ash breathed. Oh, crap. I wonder how Ash is doing, Misty said, looking out of the window at the vale below the town of Rhoda, taking in the sights of the beautiful pocket country. I mean, you know how he gets. Butterfree nodded, floating a few feet from her to give her some space. He himself was astonished by the sheer size of the tree of beginning, seen far off in the distance. Pidgeot chirped to herself, barely able to fit in the room. At that moment, a horizontal pillar of debris erupted out of the wall in the area of the audience chamber, showering some of the gardens below with pebbles that used to be masonry. An azure light could be seen inside the hole, before a blue-clothed figure jumped out barely ahead of a pulsing aura sphere. Ash, for such it was, hit the ground feet first and started running, showing no ill effects for the drop. A Lucario, blurred with speed, followed him out the hole. Seconds later, what looked like Pikachu and Riolu appeared in the gap, staggering back from the sudden edge. Misty reached for Pidgeot's Pokeball on the side. I'll send you out there. Then you grab those two and get them to him. Seconds later, Pidgeot was gliding over to the hole in the wall, where she picked up Riolu and Pikachu before vanishing to the north, where the aura wielders had gone before. First a traitor and now an incompetent liar. How I once respected you is beyond me. Ash backed away desperately, dodging as many blows as he could and flaring his own aura to cancel the hits he could not dodge. I'm telling you, I'm not Sir Aaron. You've been in that staff for a couple thousand years. The two were fighting in a small, rocky depression in the valley, where Lucario had finally caught up with the retreating human. Why should I believe you? This is some form of trap. I'm his direct descendant. Ash raised a protect, the field no longer weak and momentary but standing like a wall in Lucario's path, so you're confusing our auras. I'm not him. Lucario broke the barrier with a force palm strike, the aura spike widening swiftly from the needle point that breached the technique to force the whole thing to pop. Exactly the sort of excuse a dishonored cur would use. Ash sighed, briefly feeding far too much power to Aaron's boots and jumping back about 30 feet, before closing his eyes as he skidded to a halt. He'd need every edge he had, and it still wouldn't be enough. He saw Lucario spinning up an aura sphere. Oh crap. Let's see. How did he do this? Mirror coat. His left hand flashed out, translucent in the counterattack technique, while he began building his own sphere in the right, flung back behind him still from breaking his slide. All too soon, Lucario was charging, the aura sphere flying just ahead of him. Presumably the intent was to stop Ash from switching to counter in time for the physical attack that was on the way. Well, Ash had a way of handling that. Hopefully. The mirror coat caught the aura sphere, wrapped it in Ash's own aura and turned it over to him to control, giving him one in each hand. He forced his right forward to match the left and lined both up with Lucario's palm strikes. This is gonna suck. Ash caught the twin blows in his aura spheres. The impact almost knocked Ash off his feet. Even with the boots being used to anchor him, Ash's raw strength was no match for that of his opponent. There was a crackle like fireworks as the Pokémon tried to force through the human's new defensive measure by main strength. A plan that was depressingly likely to succeed. To be honest, the gloves didn't enhance replenishment rate, just gave larger storage capacity, while the cape worked too slowly. How the mighty have fallen, former friend of mine. Lucario practically spat. Fleeing from justice, and then finding yourself too weak to avoid it on top of that. Thunder. Ash gained a reprieve as Pikachu and the others arrived like the proverbial cavalry, the overloaded electric attack knocking the aura Pokémon aside. And now you have more servants. I see that your Pidgeot is still with you, as well. Did he not flee from your iniquity? The entire battle seemed to freeze in place. Ash sighed internally. That's torn it. I'm a girl, you complete idiot. Sky attack. The huge, nearly instantaneous phoenix of pure energy rocked the small rubble depression, leaving a rather larger blast crater. Lucario coughed, straightening up. That was unexpected. No matter. The bird had presumably caught his foe in the blast as well, so this could finally be ended. As the residual energy from the attack began to clear, he closed his eyes once more, in the familiar mode of behavior of aura adepts, to find his target. There he was, doubled over in pain and held up by the electric Pokémon that had saved him last time, but there was a Riolu standing in front of him, hands glowing, ready to defend. A Riolu. Lucario knew. He knew that it was literally impossible for any of his species, or their pre-evolutions, to support evil. Their sense of morality was genetic. But then, he realized then that the other was correct. He had been in the staff for far longer than he had expected. Oops. I am starting to think that maybe I should just go back in. Oh, you can't go and do that. I mean, were you released a few years from now as was originally planned, you'd be too weak to prevent the necessity of purifying the tree from draining you all the way and killing you. Ash then gestured towards the crystalline organism. As it is, if you get back to the meditation and training that builds aura reserves, you ought to be able to survive even that drastic measure from being able to finish you off. And then Rhoda, and the Mew associated with the tree, would have a guardian again. Very well, then, if it is as important as you claim. Though to be honest I am still trying to get used to the whole time travel concept. I finally managed to tag you with the memories, right? True. But there wasn't nearly as much as for some. The bit about chocolate interested me, though. I'll drop some off when I get a free day. Thanks to Pidgeot, we have more flex in our schedule than before. Ash grinned. She might have even forgiven you for the mistake by this time next year. You can hardly blame me. Actually, yes I can. A lot. But I won't, because you were confused and because I was really expecting it. Thank you. Lucario then looked more slyly at Ash. And I'll try to make sure that the Queen isn't too upset you're taking Aaron's staff. I'd ask how you knew, but it's probably aura again, isn't it? There are a myriad of uses, most of them more subtle than much of what you've done. Though holding several millennia of life experiences in your head is rather more impressive than that attempt at combat. Come on. I've had, what, a month at most. That's not bad. You could have been training for a good year now, had you paid attention the last time you met me. But enough of that. Get going, young chosen. You have far to go still. Ash palmed his forehead. Do you know about that too? This is ridiculous. Why didn't anyone tell me about it? I only know because it's hereditary and you're Sir Aaron's descendant. I have no intention of being an apologist for all the gods you've met, though. Lucario gave a crooked smile, the same one Sir Aaron had displayed whenever he found something completely hilarious. Come to that, my next few years sound like bliss. Just hanging around here, meditating on the nature of the universe, and absolutely no being possessed by the spirit of the king of a land that sank under the sea 1,000 years ago. As Ash's incredulous look, Lucario relented. All right, Sir Aaron sent me a memory packet of what he saw of your life. He thought it'd be funny, and he was right. Ever considered selling your life story to an anime company? You'd be pretty popular. This is just getting ridiculous. How do you know about anime? Because you do, of course. I can just see it now. Aura's Glow, starring Ash Ketchum. With Brock as the comic relief, that girl you travel with as the love interest, of course, and. Wait, what? Who could have foreseen just how close the two of you would become when you met thanks to the chance destruction of her bike? Ash's eye began twitching. Please be more specific. You just described most of the girls I know. That would be telling. The hero never actually works out he has feelings until. Until what? Puberty. That would at least be a help. Pikachu shook his head vigorously. No, it wouldn't. It never is. Riolu glanced up at Pidgeot. Will I become that weird later? She gently caressed him with a wing. Scarily. I think the weird ones are the strong ones. What about you? She flapped her other wing at the crater lip. Riolu saw that the kanji characters for I'm female, twit, were carved on the surface in a tracery of molten glass. I just hide my neuroses better. It's a much better way to do things. Go partly nuts as an outlet. The Knight of Honor gripped his implements tightly. This was a matter of great importance, and he needed all the help he could get. Glancing at the huge forms all around him, he closed his eyes. And was slapped by one of the 1,000 hands of Arceus. No cheating with Aura Sight, Aaron. Sir Aaron rubbed his side. Why not? I mean, your god, Dialga can look into the future to see what everyone has, and I swear Palkia has been grav lensing to give him viewpoints behind my seat. It's the price you pay for playing poker with deities. MRF. Pity Lucario isn't here, he'd back me up. It's a good thing he's unavailable, it means he's actually alive. Regardless, I insist that Aura Sight also be allowed unless you want to disallow spatial and temporal tampering as well. The travelers walked up the gently sloping foothills of Mount Moon, easily one of the stranger places in the world. It was a place that seemed to attract meteorites, hundreds of them being found in the area. In the time of the samurai, it was a major center of the smith's art, many legendary blades of meteorite iron coming from the small cluster of peaks. Nowadays, of course, it was more of a thoroughfare from Pewter to Cerulean, linking together the northern cities of the Kanto region proper. It was also infested with Zubats, Geodude and other such pests. Gah! Damn it! Not again. The rock that Ash had tripped over glared at him before rolling off in a huff. I thought you were supposed to be using that blindfold to practice Aura Sight. It's hard. Damn it. If I leave the blindfold on, I can't see the real rocks well enough, and if I take it off, then I can't tell which ones move all over the place. Twit. What? You heard. Put it over one eye, idiot. Ash stared at Pikachu. You couldn't have mentioned this earlier, perhaps. The rest of the group just shook their heads. He may be training as an Aura Guardian, but he's still as stupid as the Ash we all remember, Misty muttered to them. Brock nodded. Tell me about it. It's like he's a different person in a battle, though. You have one new text message. Ash and Pikachu stopped staring at one another in mutual exasperation, and turned to Ash's backpack. Neither made any other move. Rolling his eyes, Riolu reached into the backpack and drew out the Pokédex. Let's see. Says, battle in 10 minutes, will be filmed so the boss gets why we're focusing on you, don't break character. J, M, A, W, G. Huh. These are the guys you told me about. Ash took the device from his newest Pokémon. Yeah, but I didn't expect there to be that extra letter, hey. Maybe the thing they left us was their phone number or something. Brock slapped his forehead. We are idiots. How we didn't see that one coming. Ash was concentrating hard. Extra letter. And it's a G. Initial G. Team Rocket. This would normally be a chancy prospect for him, remembering such a detail over a 5-year gap. It must be James's pet Growlithe. Ash had seen his entire life twice, most recently less than 2 months ago. Misty looked relieved. Well, a Growlithe we can handle. Okay. Everyone, looks like we're on. Then. MWA ha ha ha. Jessie's maniacal laughter rang out across the sparsely wooded, grassy plain, and Ash's companions prepared themselves for yet another Team Rocket encounter. The month or two of break had been nice for Ash, at least. He'd never gone more than a week or so without meeting the team since his 11th birthday, and by 12 they were often multiple times a day. But enough of reminiscing. Ash gasped dramatically. That symbol, are you members of Team Rocket? Well, maybe a bit of reminiscing. It was kinda fun. That's right, brat. James joined in. Now, pay attention. The two emerged from the trees, trailed by their 3 Pokémon, or 2 Pokémon and third team member depending on if you asked Meowth. Prepare for trouble. Make it double. To protect the world from devastation. To unite all peoples within our nation. To denounce the evils of truth and love. To extend our reach to the stars above. Jesse. James. Team Rocket, blast off at the speed of light. Surrender now, or prepare to fight. Meowth. That's right. Ash looked askance as the trio. You going to do that every time? James smirked. Maybe, maybe not. But it was certainly handy this time, wasn't it? Ash angrily began, what do, before being interrupted by Misty. Guys, look around. Brock saw it first. They've boxed us in. There's fire in every direction. Jessie joined her counterpart in a cocky grin. Yes, there is. All thanks to Growly, and of course the fact that you're twits enough to let us get through the whole motto. James nodded. Now, Growly, split them up with a little flare blitz. The sound of tearing silk was all the warning the group got. Diving to the sides, Ash and his Pokémon were separated from Brock and Misty by a wall of fire and molten stone. The cause skidded to a halt in front of James, revealing to all and sundry that yes, James now had an Arcanine. Ash was already scrambling for his gloves. Luckily for him, he'd been wearing the boots as a quick form of training. Just make relative gravity for you slightly higher than normal, you build up muscle at an amazing rate. Damn, this isn't good. Any way we can link up again? Brock and Misty were sending out their own, sadly short by their estimation, teams. Steelix can't take the heat, and Geodude's too small. Misty. She nodded. Yeah, I'll have a go. Ack. Poison clouds began to fall on the separated groups from overhead, as well as a rain of poison sting barbs. Steelix. Block the barbs. Geodude. Set up a sandstorm to blow away the poison. Misty gasped for breath, before grabbing a handkerchief and tying it over her mouth. That's not much better. I'm working with 2 Pokémon here, like it or leave it, huffed Brock. At least we have a steel type. James's voice floated over the sound of the roaring fire. Thanks for reminding us. Growly. Fire blast. Misty turned in shock. That's not good. Starmie. Ice beam on Steelix. Staryu. Goldeen. Best water attack as a counter to the fire. Steelix started to glow cherry red as the leading edge of the attack approached, before the water and ice attacks blunted the worst of it to result in an uneasy stalemate barely within safe temperatures. The poison duo had floated over to the other side of the firewall. It was clear what was going on. Arbok was wrapped around wheezing for better mobility. Ash had a problem here. He had no steel type like his friends did. He rapidly released his team anyway, throwing the balls one-handed as he pulled the other glove on with his teeth. Pidgeot, can you blow away the gas? Easily. Without fanning the flames. Not quite so easy, but still manageable. Good. Now. Meowth leapt onto Pidgeot from above and started clawing. Not forgotten me, had ya? Ack. Ash scrambled for a solution. Riolu, get Meowth off there. Butterfree, see if you can handle the duo in the sky. No sooner had he spoken than Arbok uncoiled and leapt off, plunging deep into the ground. Ash's mind flashed, discarding plans and modifying others. There was only one choice. Butterfree, stay up there. Confusion if you can get in range. Pikachu, can you take the snake? Yes, I most certainly can. Good. As for the Arcanine, Ash pulled on his new gloves. I'll handle that. Ash. Wait. Ash charged, feeling the power in the gloves beginning to surge and heedless of the calls of his Pokémon. Everyone else was occupied. He needed to stop Growly before Brock lost his Steelix. The strange icy detachment of battle descended, a zen-like state, but merged with training so that body knew what to do without instructions, and yet mind word too fast for the body to keep up. Force. Palm. Ash's aura-enhanced blow blasted Growly off his feet and sent him rolling over and over into the brush, before the legendary Pokémon pawed the ground and charged back at him. Ash took the roaring blow of the Flare Blitz, feeling its heat surge up his crossed arms, defended with what felt like a bastardized Reflect and some elements of Endure, before launching a kick that threw Growly once more. He was running high on adrenaline and aura, using it to reinforce his body and empower his blows, fighting as an Aura Guardian, and in this perfect state he could fight one of the most powerful kinds of Pokémon, and he could win. So long as it was dealt with in only a few seconds, of course. Oh bugger, he's getting back up again. Growly shook his mane, rolling back to his feet, and began to gather the heat for another Flare Blitz. And was blasted far enough back that Jesse and James had to step out of the way of his rolling form, by 3 water gun and a purple dragon breath. Ash collapsed to his knees in exhaustion. Note to self, remember you're not quite 11 yet, as the rest of Team Rocket's Pokémon fell back past him, pursued by his vengeful team, and Brock and Misty steamrolled past on his other side. Well, it looks like you held out this time, but you won't be so lucky forever. Jesse called, while James hauled Growly into the basket of a balloon hidden in the brush. The rest of Team Rocket piled in, and Growly bit through the mooring cable, sending the entire contrivance shooting up into the air at ludicrous speeds. What the hell? Pidgeot answered for them. Double balloon, hydrogen on the inside, helium outside. I saw a few near pallet. Incredibly fast riser if it's set up properly, and I think they recalled their Pokémon as it took off. They're long gone. Flipping hell, they're more competent than I expected. No. I don't care how much you're all inexplicably fans of it, we are not doing sumo wrestling next. What's your problem with it? Arceus looked hurt. You all weigh at least 8 times as much as I do, for a start. Oh, all right then. Badminton. Why not Monopoly? Dialga perked up, and rushed over holding a small metal boot. Fine. Have it your way, we'll play Monopoly. Red and blue version. Pardon. I said Kanto version. Sir Aaron looked suspicious for a moment. Sounds all right. Okay. Dialga gets the boot, Palkia has the car, I get the Growlithe, and that leaves you the bowler hat. It's not as good as my proper hat. My proper hat does cool things, like. Shish. The readers don't know yet. Readers. Arceus, creator of all, looked distinctly shifty. Nothing. The tape wound to a close with the ground receding at a breakneck pace, before the image cut out. Giovanni allowed himself a small smile. And then, seeing the trepidation on the faces of the agents who'd presented it, widened it into a full, though still exquisitely controlled, grin. Well, I am most impressed. So, you seem to have chosen something of a difficult target this time, but then you've shown quite astonishing skills. I must say, using the chivalry of a hero against them seems to be quite the innovation, though I doubt it would work on the conventional police we normally deal with. His face hardened. Now, on to more detailed business. First, why did you choose them in the first place? Jessie spoke, her voice slightly uncertain. We first met him a couple of months ago, in Viridian. At the time he had only the Pikachu, and he was able to shut down our plan before we even initiated it. With this to consider, we tried to get hold of heavier firepower to overwhelm him. James took over. And as you can see, it almost worked. We managed to occupy every one of their Pokémon, despite fighting at more than 2-to-1 odds against some real rarities like that Pidgeot and the Riolu he got from who knows where, and were only beaten by that weird thing he did where he beat up Growly and took the pressure off. Giovanni frowned. Yes, that was the most troubling bit. He said. Force palm. Yes. Meowth nodded along with the humans. Yep. I think so, though I was more concentrating on fighting off that Riolu. Giovanni made an understanding noise. Fortunate that the cameras captured it, then. Yes, that's quite troubling. Not only did this Ash use a Pokémon move, moreover, a move that as far as I know is unique to a very few Pokémon, but he also took a Flare Blitz head-on. That is not something I like to have happening among my foes. Then you have to consider that these gloves, he rewound the tape and paused at a point where Ash was in full light, during his charge, resemble quite closely those of the legendary hero Sir Aaron. It may well be that he is possessed of the same talents as that legend. Very disquieting, especially as he is in possession of, as you say, both a Pidgeot and a Riolu. Giovanni fell silent. After almost a minute, James spoke up. Anything else, boss? Oh, yes. That Arcanine of yours, I want it. James jerked as if stung. Boss. You heard me. Hand him over. He's clearly an exceptional specimen of the species if his Flare Blitz can melt rock. That's the kind of firepower that Team Rocket needs. And it needs it where the higher-ups can access it. The Pokémon, please. James reached for the Pokeball on his belt, hesitated, then drew his hand back again. No. No. You are sure of this? Defying your leader. Jesse and James shrank back, and Meowth fell off his chair, as the leader of Team Rocket rounded on them. We'd never defy you, boss. Then hand over the Pokémon. Need I remind you of our motto? Our real one. The trio shook their heads. Steal Pokémon for profit. Exploit Pokémon for profit. All Pokémon exist for the glory of Team Rocket. Then what's the problem? Will you defy me over this trifle? You can most certainly requisition more and more diverse Pokémon from the team pool. Jesse and James looked at one another, then both shared a glance at Meowth. The three nodded to one another and, visibly trembling, James gave their answer. With all due respect, boss, you'll never get Growly. He's a good friend of mine. Giovanni glowered at them for a moment more, then suddenly smiled. A genuine one this time, full of warmth. Very good. You pass. Crash. Jesse and James fell off their chairs. Ya mean to say dat was a test? Shouted the irate Scratch Cat from the floor, before flinching as Giovanni's Persian bared his fangs. Well, yes. That stuff about profit is all very good for the grunts, but we have a broader mandate than that. We're about control, yes, but for that we need to have somewhere to control. And you three have, perhaps astonishingly, just qualified for executive status. The lowest rung, perhaps, but you're privy to the true purpose. It's even in the public motto, layers within layers. Protect the world from devastation. We need the place standing to get anywhere in it, and so we have the secondary purpose of finding global threats and stopping them. Working with heroes is a must for that, even taking on many of their traits. Something you just displayed rather well. Giovanni tossed the trio small badges. Here, these are your new rank insignia. As of now, your task is to build up your cell, trail this, Ash Ketchum, test his strength every so often, and try to lead him into getting involved with stopping any new regional or global scale threats. Oh, and he smiled at them again, don't boast about any of this to the other members. You might need to sacrifice other rocket plots to the hero you're trailing, after all, and we don't want people slacking off. Brock tossed the Pokeball between his hands. He'd caught his Crobat earlier that day, and found that he was more or less the same as memory stated, but with the addition of cross poison, apparently from training at the pewter gym. You going to keep doing that? Brock nodded, not taking his eyes off the small red and white sphere. It's nice to know another friend's back with you, you know. Feeling exuberant is only natural. Yeah, whatever. Hey, Misty. What is it, Ash? Planning for Cerulean Gym already? Pretty much, yeah. Want me to restore your Gyarados for you before the battle? You would just love that, wouldn't you, Ash Ketchum? A water, flying type. Not a chance. I'll just use what I have and what the gym has. Misty began to grin evilly. Actually, what about if we make it a 3 versus 3 match, 3 independent battles? Sounds interesting. So you mean I can't just sweep you with Pikachu? Misty winked. That's certainly the plan. Spoilsport. You already called the Vermilion team leader, you don't get to have them all. Not another word from you, Riolu. Make me. Blia. Ash sighed deeply as the two Pokémon riding on his shoulders had a shouting match that began to devolve somewhat into a cringe-inducing slap fight. I might have preferred it when I didn't have the translation. Oh, it's sometimes inconvenient, but the benefits more than make up for it, right? To say nothing of last night's display. Ash nodded, feeling self-conscious. Last night's display had been a three-way mock battle between him, Pikachu and Riolu. Aura flaring, protect, detect, enhanced close combat blows, and Ash had finally managed to recompose his aura, paralyzing Riolu with an electrically imbued force palm that had unfortunately also locked up his own left hand, so hence the victory had gone to Pikachu seconds later. The next step would hopefully be preventing that backlash. But the fireworks involved had been quite impressive, actually lighting up the sky almost as much as the jury-rigged moon rocket that had soared up early the next morning. Damn Clefairy. How far is it to Cerulean from here? Misty glanced around at the terrain. I'd say, about a day's walk, maybe a little less. Right, so a long way still to go. Good to know. Ash took a small notebook from Aaron's bag, labeled, Medical Use of Aura, and held it up to the Pokédex scanner, flipping through the book at speed so the entire thing could be recorded. Got it. OCR complete. Audiobook version ready. Thanks. Ash then pulled a recessed headphone out of the side of the red device, slotting it into his ear. He had decided that listening to Aaron's notes while walking would save at least a little time. The use of aura to heal or treat wounds is one of the earliest uses of all, dating back at least 1,000 years to when the use of internal aura was called Ki. The Ki dancers, as aura adepts were known at the time, were capable of pushing their own aura into that of an injured person to supercharge the body. While this was relatively ineffectual compared to the effect of healing magic or the recover psychic power, it was nevertheless amazing to the peoples of the time, allowing healing rates in excess of 3 times natural. This, however, was only really possible with diseases, and gross physical trauma was extremely difficult to handle. The audio file went on, Ash listening to the accumulated knowledge of generations of aura manipulators. The bit about reinforcing the body to make broken bones less likely or even temporarily splint them with solidified aura was intriguing, especially as Ash had broken all the bones in his left arm at least once since Pewter City alone. Hang on, was that how the bone rush technique worked? That had interesting implications. Right, the first stage of building an aura sphere is to get used to releasing power constantly, and then being able to stop it when it starts to protest the amount being fed in. I mean, it's possible to overload them to slightly ridiculous levels, but the basic attack is pretty constant in size. Pikachu frowned in concentration, blue aura flickering more or less randomly. So that's the first step for a usable attack. Ash waved his hand. Maybe yes, maybe no. Technically speaking, the first stage is an attack on its own, but it's not very often used because it's a constant release of several times the power of a force palm per second, for only a little absolute increase in damage capability. It's just inefficient, especially compared to other melee attacks. Ash stopped for a second and put a finger ponderingly on his chin. You might have a point though, as perhaps it could be modified to act as some kind of booster on other attacks, having an aura curtain around the body. But if you experiment in that, I recommend using your own element first. Pikachu nodded, still trying to even out the little surges and dips in his flow. What are the other stages? Second ones containing it, that's when it stops being nearly so wasteful. It sort of fills up a shell and then stops. The natural size it takes is the one with the least energy, smaller ones are more powerful and focused, while larger ones just sort of explode violently when they hit basically anything more solid than a good fog. That's different to any other attack in the universe. How? I seem to recall a bite attack blew up once. Okay. Good point. But at least this one detonates towards the target. Ash formed a standard aura sphere with an effort of will, and held up the gently glowing blue ball. As this is, it's a good melee attack, but the third step is the most useful one. It gives it a gyroscopic spin, Ash demonstrated by setting it gently whirling for a second, and it can hence be thrown properly. It also gives it the punch and penetration power that make it work so well against otherwise tough materials like steel and rock. Ash formed another sphere in the other hand and spun it up, then threw them in succession at a convenient dead tree. The first wobbled unsteadily through the air and detonated when it hit a twig, producing a concussive wash of air that snapped a few small branches, but little else. The second flew arrow straight and blew a crater halfway into the trunk, sending splinters all over the clearing and producing an ominous creak. Wow. Pikachu commented absently, his aura stream now a little more constant. There are other tricks to it. For example, the fourth stage is to add a pattern to the central component that tracks an aura signature and adjusts the path. That can't be evaded, but it can be dodged or decoyed into an obstacle, especially if it's already gone a long way and is slowing down. It's called terminal attack maneuvers. I have no clue why, I just call it never miss. I'm still working on that one. Finally getting frustrated, Pikachu switched to electric aura and produced a steady flow, before wrapping it in a globe and throwing it into the ground. There. I did it. Now can I get some sleep? Wow. You managed to use Electro Ball for 3 times the normal energy cost, go you. Riolu snarked from his perch on a tree branch. He's got a point, Pikachu. The reason you're practicing with Blue Aura is to avoid getting into bad habits. I don't care. I managed a steady flow and I'm using that as a learner step. Unfortunately, all our Pokémon are too tired, so why don't you accept this Cascade badge? Misty ground her teeth. They'd arrived several hours before last time, and yet still her sisters were giving up without a fight. Well, screw that. I'll fight him. Daisy glanced round. Oh, look, the runt. Why should we let you? Because I'm as much a gym leader here as you three. I did the test too. Ash leant over to Brock. Test. You have to fight the Elite Four. Your advantage is knowing their order of battle. I think I heard that Misty flattened Bruno and Lance, whereas I only managed to take Lorelei, and that was a close one. Wow. Brock grinned. You should see the Elite Four entrance tests. They involve legendaries. Ash looked over at the massive argument that was developing in the center of the room, now involving all 4 sensational sisters. I'd certainly prefer to earn the badge if there's a choice. Misty nodded at the words, before walking off into the bowels of the gym, apparently deciding to simply ignore her sisters. She returned a minute or so later with 2 Pokeballs, and added a third into her collection from her belt. The battle will be 3 matches, each 1-on-1. Neither winner nor loser may join another match. Understood. Ash gave a wide smile. Perfectly. Right. Choose your first Pokémon, Challenger. Pikachu, it's best to wait till the end before using him. Pidgeot's honestly a little too big for the gym. Go for it, Riolu. The little Pokémon nodded to him, hopped onto one of the floating platforms and took a stance. Misty nodded. Starmie. Oh crap. Riolu. You haven't learned any dark-type moves, perchance. Riolu had Shadow Claw, which would do some damage at least, but the real danger was offensive psychic attacks. A dark-type move would allow for countermeasures against it, were one available. Nope. Damn it. Right. Misty is sneaky as all get out. Just do your best. Planning on it. Riolu closed one eye, allowing him to mix aura with regular sight. Brock had moved to the side of the pool. The trio were essentially ignoring the sensational sisters by now. Begin. Riolu immediately dove into the water as a thunderbolt sizzled past, before grabbing back onto the platform and detonating an incoming water pulse with his own aura sphere. The plucky little Pokémon had a problem. He was a close-range fighter, and his opponent was not only skilled at ranged combat, but was psychokinetic. Well, where there's a will and all that, Riolu was forced to try out something new. He'd discussed the possibility with Ash and Pikachu, but the 3 had never tested it. There was a first time for everything. He skidded across the slick platform, dodging another thunderbolt, an ice beam and slicing through a pulse of psychic force with hastily formed shadow claws. Only his running detect through the open eye let him dodge through the gap thus created, and he heard a gasp from the other 3 gym leaders. Wait till they get a load of this. Riolu sprinted forward, not stopping at the edge of the platform, and ran across the water on blue glowing feet. What the hell? That was Misty. Apparently she hadn't heard. What a pity. Okay. Got one shot at this. That Starmie's currently low down enough to reach. Starmie. Get up. Away from him. Too late. Each shadow claw. The flickering phantom claws that extended from the little nubs on Riolu's wrists bit deep, one of them scoring a line across the core and a third of the way through it before another psychokinetic pulse threw him back into the water. Okay. So much for plan. What is it by now, F? Riolu formed yet more plans in his trained mind, discarded two of them because he didn't know Starmie's entire moveset and another thanks to the absence of a convenient palm tree, then decided to just wing it. Barely had Riolu broken the water's surface when another thunderbolt sizzled into attack from the hovering Starmie. I thought this was the water gym. Oh well, this can help. His eyes flashed. Copycat. Eyes widened all over the gym as Misty's Starmie was blasted with a high-power lightning bolt, its core dimming from a steady glow to more of a flicker. Riolu was hardly unscathed. Of course, he had to absorb the power of the bolt first, but felt triumphant as he began to charge another aura sphere. And then the starfish glowed softly, and the core shone brightly once more. Oh, damn and blast it, recover. His hastily thrown aura sphere blocked the psychic, and his aura sight prevented any effect from the confused ray, but a trio of water pulses in rapid succession slammed him into unconsciousness and deep into the water. Brock dove into the pool from the referee spot, retrieving the little aura user before he swallowed too much water, and had Lily carry him to the gym infirmary. Not the best start. Perhaps, Ash. Shut up. I believe in my team. We'll make it yet. So you say. Well, pick your next Pokémon. Butterfree. Okay. Seal. Misty's two present sisters gasped in shock. Misty. What are you doing with Seal? He's not a combat Pokémon. Butterfree. Do as you see fit. You know your own style better than I do. With pleasure. Seal. Double team and safeguard. Butterfree watched from above as the seal seemed to shatter into a half-dozen copies, which began to glow softly. Well, a defensive strategy is it, then. Butterfree began smoothly tracing a complex path in the rafters, dodging the occasional aqua jet or water pulse attacks being launched up there by the Cerulean Gym's seal. Butterfly dance again. It's a good start in long-range battles. Let's see how long before she notices. Seal. Natural gift. What does that do, Ag? Aw crap. Butterfree broke the dance and went into a falling leaf maneuver as a blast of flame scarred the ceiling. I now officially hate Oka berries. Misty had pulled a huge basket of the things from somewhere, and was tossing them to Seal whenever he needed to reload. The butterfly thought for a second, and called upon a tailwind to give him a speed boost. This will be ironic. Okay. Seal, natural gift again. The seal blinked as a pale blur snatched the berry out of midair, gulping it down before turning to face them as the spice flared off heat, his body temperature dropping with its lack to the minimum safe for his species. Ha! So much for my fire weakness. Bug bite is such a handy move sometimes. Misty shrugged before giving new orders to the Cerulean Gym seal. Aurora beam. Why? Arceus, why? Ice shard as well. Somehow Butterfree avoided being hit as the barrage of ice attacks covered over the ceiling with a thick rime. Okay. Enough with the running and hiding, it's time to take the initiative. Sunny day. The translucent roof of the gym began to glisten with the supernaturally intense sunlight that the move called down. Seal. Use rain dance. I said sunny day. The incipient rain clouds cleared away from the gym. Hail. Once more. I said. Sunny day. The weather roiled above the gym for a few seconds, before expanding circles of clear sky pulsed outwards and banished all the clouds within about 20 miles. Fine. Then. Ice beam. Solar beam. The bolts of glowing light collided about halfway to the roof of the gym and detonated, blasting shattered ice and snow outwards. As the humans flinched away from the cloud of diamond dust that resulted, a sparkling wind blew lazily down towards Seal, who dodged the attack despite vision obscured by sparkling ice crystals. Unfortunately for Misty, that wasn't the point of the attack at all, or at least not the only one. Butterfree glowed, the secondary effect of Silverwind infusing him with natural aura. Time for an end to it. Aerial ace. Seal was hit a glancing blow on the flank by the speeding butterfly, going fast enough that the wind shock produced managed to clear away most of the dust in the air along his path. Barely had he noticed when Butterfree bore in again from a different angle, this time releasing an energy ball on the way past that blew Seal into the air. Now Seal was out of his element. Butterfree wasn't about to let him back in, and peppered him with energy balls from enough angles at high enough speed that the little water Pokémon was effectively juggled. No. Seal. Aqua Ring and then disable. Butterfree wasn't going to let that happen, and used the sunlight still pouring into the room to launch a massive solar beam, one that shot Seal into the pool and hence drenched everyone in the room. Brock lowered his hands from protecting his face, and stared at the devastated room. Butterfree wins the battle for Ash's team, the score is tied. Ash jumped in the air. Yeah. Nice work Butterfree. Misty and her sisters were staring at the ice sculptures all over the ceiling, the water dripping down the walls and the occasional crack in the tiling. Ash startled them out of it. Well, Misty. Third match. Yeah. Send out your choice. Ash nodded. Pikachu. Go for it. Chinchou. The little angler Pokémon materialized on one of the platforms, with Pikachu on the other. Chinchou. Not one I remember seeing before. Is it one of the gym Pokémon? Yes it is, Ash, and I chose her especially to beat Pikachu. Pikachu can't lose against a water type. Thunderbolt. Pikachu nodded, and sent a thunderbolt snapping downrange. It did absolutely jack. What the hell? Ash shouted indignantly. I second that. Chinchou has the ability Volt Absorb, meaning it's not harmed by electric attacks but is in fact healed by them, Dexter chimed in. Damn it. So what does work on them? Not much. Grass attacks, ground attacks, everything else is not much use. And what's more, some of them can absorb water to heal. Surprised, Ash. Misty called over at him. I knew you'd use Pikachu, so I got Chinchou out from the tanks. Of course I prepared to deal with any of the Pokémon you have, I know what they are. Ash groaned. How had he not remembered? Misty was hardly going to just let him take the badge. This was even worse than if she'd found a Wooper in there, though the lack of ground attacks was at least something. Need a little help here. Ash looked back up, and saw Pikachu scampering around on his platform dodging salvos of light that looked like ice and signal beams. Okay. I have an idea. First, see if you can get onto the roof. Pikachu complied, making for one of the still dripping walls. Chinchou got there first, however, freezing the walls and making them too slick to get up. Pikachu replied by firing another sizzling thunderbolt at his foe. It didn't do anything, but it made him feel better. 10 minutes had elapsed. Pikachu was starting to get really annoyed by now. The constant dodging was getting on his nerves, though he had managed to catch the thunder wave sent at him by Chinchou in his lightning rod ability and avoid getting paralyzed. Ash had explained his plan over the few brief snatches they could seize while Misty couldn't hear, and the first part was still getting to the ceiling for cover. Up to now, though, there'd been essentially nothing he could do to get up there. The wall was slick, his legs weren't developed enough for bounce and he had no wings. Pikachu, I have an idea. About time. Hit the wall as hard as you can. Try to shatter enough of the ice. Pikachu simply nodded. He had just the new move, too. Volt Tackle was a simple concept. Slam yourself into the opponent while covered in lightning, but actual execution was somewhat more complex. The electricity had to be used to propel the movement of the user, and be released properly on impact. There was a reason that it was normally only Pichu and their evolutions who learned the attack, as it was hard to do properly without their internal voltage stores they could use as the leading edge of the electron envelope. Pikachu was currently performing it with the lightning replaced by his newly mastered steady flow of electric aura, making it a much more powerful version of his double edge. It had some minor difficulties. Oh holy Arceus, my face feels like it's on fire. The entire gym shook as Pikachu hit the wall like a freight train, the ice on that wall shattering and the sculptures on the ceiling, already dripping with melt, shook dangerously. Fortunately nothing actually fell. Pikachu shook himself back to muzzy awareness after the impact. Reflexively training had some benefits, after all, forming an iron tail to bounce away the signal beam that Chincho fired his way. Where am I? And what kind of building hit me? Pikachu. Get up the wall. Oh. Now I remember. I hit it. Pikachu shook his head to clear it. Thank goodness I'm good at climbing. The electric mouse dug his claws into the spiderwebbing fractures along the wall of the gym battle chamber and hopped up to the roof, hiding away from attack in the ice sculptures. I have a couple of minutes before she can beat her way in, more than enough time. Misty stared up at the roof as yellow lightning began to crackle around the cloudy image of the mouse, forming into an indistinct circle as she watched. Ash. What's going on? Oh. I think Pikachu's just using charge at the moment. Nope, that's the other move now. What other move? No electric type attack can hurt Chincho. Well, see, I was thinking that there's no way he can win so long as there's water for Chincho to heal with. Ash broke off for a second as Pikachu leapt out into clear air, 3 circles of lightning independently rotating around him. So we decided to get rid of it. Pikachu. Volt crash. The 3 circles locked together into one at a horizontal angle, and a bolt of electricity at least a foot thick blasted down into the cerulean gym pool, evaporating the lot in a massive steam explosion. Volt crash had a major drawback. That is, Pikachu wasn't fully evolved. One use completely discharged his voltage sacks for almost a minute. But that wasn't a problem in this fight. Misty doubled over, hacking and coughing from the dust in the air. Cough, that hyper beam. Asterisk cough, variant, you actually, asterisk cough, finished it. This morning, Pikachu told me he had it done. We wanted to save it for a special occasion. Now, earthquake. My pleasure. Pikachu clapped his paws together in mid-air and then drew his right back, burning with a blue flame. Misty's hair twinged out. Can he even learn that? It's just the ground shaking, not terribly hard to fake. Pikachu slammed into the ground, balled fist first. The building shook, ice rained down, the grounded Chincho flinched, and the cracks in the walls grew wider. Ash noticed it first. Crap. Everyone out. The roof's about to cave in. The 4 sisters, Ash, Brock and the Pokémon not involved in the battle fled through the emergency exits as the roof fell in pieces on the combatants. Pikachu was able to dodge all the bits and, being a chivalrous Pokémon, even broke the one headed for Chincho in half with a quick force palm. Being a pragmatic Pokémon, he pinned her to the ground with his iron tail and slapped her in the temples, finally knocking her unconscious. Holy, that was more effort than I would have liked. I am so glad we won't be facing any more gym leaders with future knowledge. Yes, I got the Cascade badge. Misty ran after the laughing Ash, reaching for him with the clear intent to try and strangle him. It wasn't enough to destroy my bike, you had to break the gym as well. Come on, Misty, what else could I have done? That was supposed to be an impossible fight to teach humility, you jerk. The gyms aren't just about battles, they're supposed to be character tests as well. Pikachu looked up at Brock. Really? Yeah, each gym follows some philosophy usually related to their element. So some of them, like my rock type, are about endurance and the inability to give up, whereas others are about handling their element, case in point being Cinnabar and their stewardship of the volcano. If someone can beat the gym anyway, they do get the badge, but that's not their only purpose. Ash won most of his for his strength of character, not the power of his Pokémon. Ah. Okay, gotcha. What are Misty's sisters doing, then? Brock looked across. Huh. Never seen the water version of rapid construction before. Looks to me like. Brock squinted. Yeah, they're getting a Vaporeon to manipulate the groundwater in the area and bring up silica, then crystallizing it into opal. It's only a stopgap, but not bad at all. Course, rock types are better at rapid repair. They have to be, as most attacks that work well against rock also work well against the entire building. I'd guess that Vaporeon is specially trained for construction rather than combat. In the trees near Cerulean City, a sinister presence was watching the actions of Ash and his friends. Ah. Shut up. I'm only using da binoculars. Yes, it was Meowth, who admittedly couldn't be sinister if his life depended on it. But the binoculars were large and black, so that counts. Right. Anyway, he was keeping an eye on them because James and Jesse couldn't. No, they were far away, leaving me out here with only Growly to keep him company. Stupid humans, heading off all the way to Lavender Town, it's not right, left me with the mutt. Grr. Yipe. Sorry, big guy. Well, James, how near are we? I think the exit's just a bit further south and then, oh, we should have brought Growly. He'd be able to light our way through this stupid tunnel. Quiet, or you'll wake the Zubat. We don't want that, do we? The two shivered. They'd already had to flee from hordes of Zubat no fewer than 3 times. They did not fancy having to do so again. The problem was, they were in Rock Tunnel. Which, as anyone familiar with the geography of Kanto will know, is pitch black. They were navigating largely by guesswork and slightly via infrared, thanks to Jessie and her Arbok. Well, any more bright ideas, James? Perhaps next time we battle the twerp while directly underneath a power line. James perked up. Yeah, that might work, actually. The power line would draw the electric attacks and bam. Jessie knocked James to the floor. And then we collapse it on us, or Magna might try and beat us because we messed up their power source, or the ground caves in or something. We have terrible luck, remember? James was about to retort, when a fluttering noise was heard in the distance. He flinched in an almost Pavlovian reaction. Oh, no, we didn't, did we? James slumped to the floor in defeat. Jessie pursed her lips. Actually, I don't think so. Look at the time. James pressed the button on his expensive watch. He claimed it was a holdover from his time as a rich kid. Jessie suspected he'd stolen it from his room when they picked up Growly last week, which technically counted, and checked the lit-up display. Looks like it's the evening. So. Zubat fly outside at night. We can follow them. Oh, I see. Clever. Wheezing, James sent out the only Pokémon he had at the moment. Go the direction Arbok's going. Arbok, follow the bats. Jessie, you and I can grab onto Wheezing and that way we'll know where to go. Though they spent almost as much time being chased by the Zubat as vice versa, they did eventually stagger outside into the evening light, north of Lavender Town. Next time, we take the balloon. Jessie ranted. Well, how was I to know that Rock Tunnel wouldn't be lit up like Mount Moon is? Okay. This is the place. James looked up from his guidebook. The map note said there were interesting Pokémon around here, which will be a help. Jessie snorted. Tell me about it. We're just a bit specialized, aren't we? We're more diverse than most rocket teams. We have a fire type. Jessie looked sidelong at her teammate. That's all very well for the grunts, but we're admins now. Remember Domino's trio, back when they were low admins? Oh, yeah, Roselia, wasn't it? And her old team had an Executor and a Farfetch'd, right? Jessie shivered. That lot were freaky. The girl threw roses, the boy carried a Bakken and called himself the Blue Thunder, and the father had a palm tree on his head and didn't shut up about the Orange Islands. There's working with your Pokémon and then there's going completely mental, you know. James nodded. When Team Kuno broke up, Domino got so much more sensible, it was amazing. Anyway, keep a lookout. This trip has a purpose and don't you forget it. Sure thing, Jess. James tripped over something. Jessie rubbed her forehead in exasperation. James, for God's sakes, first just said, oh, what's this? James scrambled to his feet to see what he'd tripped over, and was startled to find it was a sleeping Abra. Well, not how I guessed we'd find the first possible catch. I suppose that maybe we should. Jessie tailed off. James nodded, but fumbled as he took his new Pokeball, a luxury ball, similar to the ones they'd earlier decanted their others into, out of the bag. He dropped it, in fact, completely losing his grip. With a flash, the Abra materialized below the descending ball and was promptly caught. The Rockets stared dumbfounded at the ball. James eventually broke the silence. Well, that's one way to ask. Jessie nodded, before motioning for James to pick up the ball. Now we've done that, we still have to look for a new Pokémon for me, remember? And we have to get back to Cerulean as well, which will take ages. Or I could take you there in a second. James jumped. Gah. Voices in my head. It's me, dumbass. The Abra that you just caught. Get it? I'm Psychic. Means I can read minds, communicate telepathically and, just incidentally, teleport the lot of us to wherever. Jesse looked contemplative. That's really cool, actually. Any limits? I need coordinates of some description or other, either a memory or an accurate map reference. GPS should do on that score. And I can't manage teleports between regions, but I can do it pretty often, and when it's just myself I can be all over the place. Not that I want to, though, too much effort. Too much effort. Are you lazy or something? It's genetic. I'm an Abra, not a Vigoroth. Fair enough, you did volunteer after all. So, Jesse, any ideas? Jesse considered. I think a type advantage for once would be nice. Sounds good. Hey, Abra, anything nearby that might qualify? Third tree from the left of the signpost pointing the way to Saffron City. Now shut it, I was asleep. The two rockets looked at the Pokeball in something akin to awe. He fell asleep in that short a time. Truly he is the slacker god. James pressed the mute button on the controls of the luxury ball, to let his newest Pokemon sleep. Well, we best be over there. Wheezing. Jessie sent out her own Arbok, and they moved carefully towards the indicated tree, senses alert for whatever they would find. What they found was a small, reptilian Pokemon shivering with terror as it stared at the Arbok, transfixing it with a stare, the fear in the youngster's eyes evident even through the bone sockets she was looking through. Yes, it was a Cubone. Jessie smiled slightly. Looks like the little sweetie is scared. The Cubone glanced round at her, and then smacked Jessie's Arbok into the ground hard enough to leave a dent. Her smile grew. Well, I like her attitude. James groaned. Sometimes I don't like your attitude. Jessie chose to ignore that. Well, little one, want to come with us? Cubone cocked her head to one side, thinking it over. Arbok woozily rose back up from the ground, and frantically shook his head at Jessie. Cubone noticed this, stuck her tongue out at the snake and jumped into Jessie's arms. Arbok sighed. Just his luck, the two new members of the team could both beat him up by type advantage. Ah well, at least he was back with Jessie after all those years apart. Why had he ever left? Even if she made dubious decisions now and then, she was generally pretty awesome. He noticed wheezing laughing at him. Most wouldn't notice as it sounded like labored breathing, but when you know I'm on. Oh, shut up. Levitate isn't perfect, you know. Ash and company. Set up on a wooded hill for the night. They'd planned to find a clearing, but the night was rainy and it was easier to just stay under the trees that they'd encountered for the past day or so, leaving the hidden village where they'd picked up Bulbasaur and celebrated Ash's 11th birthday, well, physically at least. But reuniting with his first one of the normal Kanto starters had been a great present. He'd been through more with Bulbasaur than almost any other Pokemon short of Pikachu. Ash privately suspected that last time they'd been too horribly lost to know what day it was. They had, after all, managed somehow to travel from Cerulean to Vermilion without passing through Saffron, which had to mean something was up. And, wait a minute. Ash flipped open the Pokédex. Could you give me a map of the Kanto region, please, with Bill's lighthouse and the major cities marked on? Of course. Ash traced out a path with his finger. That's just silly. Last time we actually went north. Looks like it. Where did we pick up Charmander again? Another blip appeared on the map, followed by a, "You are here," symbol. Yep. Somewhere near Route 24. That's due north of Cerulean City, whereas you're currently somehow to the west. Ash sighed. Arceus above, we really suck at finding our way. True. I recommend doing aerial reconnaissance tomorrow. Sounds good. Ash lay back under the waterproof canopy and sighed. The only disadvantage of time travel was that all the getting lost from the first time happened again. Or at least it did if you were Ash. Pikachu wandered over. Unlike most of the rest, though, like Misty's Pokémon, he had little trouble with the rainstorm and had been enjoying the way his power flowed more precisely in the beating rain. He had been using it to get in a bit of practice aiming discharge so it didn't hit certain places. He thought a radial pulse variant of Shockwave was in the offing. So, what's happening tomorrow? As I recall, we should meet Charmander fairly soon. Probably the day after tomorrow, though. Hey, yeah, he was a real trooper, wasn't he? Even back then, he sat on that rock for days waiting for that jerk Damien. Ash's face went chalk white. Days. Crap. What's WRO? Oh. No. Ash fumbled out of his sleeping bag and lunged for his pack, throwing it around one shoulder even as he snatched the Pokédex with the other hand. He grabbed his third ever Pokémon and threw the ball on the run, jumping astride Pidgeot before she had properly materialized. Pidgeot. North and east. Fast. Dex. Give me a more precise location, please. Bearing 027. 30 miles. Brock and Misty jerked awake in their own sleeping bags as a rippling boom filled the trees. Neither had heard it often, but it was the almost unmistakable sound of something going transonic very nearby. What the hell was that? Brock, is Crobat having fun with Mimic again? Brock looked equally confused. No, he's asleep, or was, do you think that was Ash? Misty made a disapproving sound. Well, if it was, I hope he understands how inconsiderate he's being. It was cold. It was wet. It was raining. These three facts were all that filled the mind of a certain thoroughly miserable lizard Pokémon, curled up on a rock in the driving rain. Damien will come. I'm sure of it. He sneezed as the rain infiltrated his sinuses, before blowing a little flame onto the rock beneath him to keep safe the refuge for his tail flame. He'll come. He has to. Inquisitive Spearow were starting to circle once more. Charmander sent them scattering again with an ember, but he was running low on energy. They didn't flee as far as they had before. Damien, where are you? I've become stronger, haven't I? I've stayed out here waiting for you. No food, no protection from the elements, for 3 days. I wish I knew how much it will take for you to consider me worthy. He was feeling sleepy. He didn't want to go to sleep. He might miss Damien's arrival, but it didn't feel as cold when he was asleep. Maybe. Just a few minutes. He slipped into gray and black half-sleep, his wariness of letting his tiny tail flame flop into the rain all that staved off deep slumber. Charmander gradually realized that falling asleep would be a really bad idea, but he couldn't focus enough to consider what to do. I'm sorry, Damien. I wasn't strong enough. There. What's that? Am I imagining things? A rushing wind, a thump, the sense of cradling arms. He's freezing. Butterfree. I don't care what it does to the weather patterns, give us some clear skies. The rain's impacts on his scales began to peter out. I suppose it's a pleasant dream to have, being rescued. But I feel afraid it's too late to be a convincing hope. He returned to bleary awareness what felt like seconds later. But since an intense sun was beating down on him, Charmander assumed he'd spent hours in a comatose state. Ah. Good. You're awake. Charmander rolled onto a side, looking at the speaker. He found that it was a Bulbasaur standing next to a trio of Pokeballs, only one of them with the indicator light that denoted it being full. Who are you? Bulbasaur looked saddened by the question for a moment, before replying. I'm just called by my species name. Like most of Ash's Pokémon. I have experience taking care of sick Pokémon, so I volunteered to watch over you while Ash went to look for some berries with Butterfree. Charmander looked lost. Ah, sorry. Ash is my trainer and the one who saved you last night. He barely got to you in time, your flame was all but invisible. Bulbasaur broke off for a second and concentrated, blasting away the few wisps of cloud that were beginning to form. There we go. Best thing for a recovering fire type. Intense sunlight and sunbathing, if nothing better is available. Oh, that reminds me. Charmander's caretaker lifted up a faintly glowing blue leaf in his prehensile vines and dropped it onto the lizard's tail flame, producing a flare in response. Few more magical leaves and you should be much better. Charmander rubbed his brow, confused. Why are you doing this? Why are you helping me? A new voice piped up. Because we're concerned, that's all. You deserve better than dying in the rain. Butterfree had returned, bearing a yashe berry in his feet. He dropped it in front of their patient. Eat up. It raises body temperature. It's exactly what you need. Behind the bug was a large shape that Charmander assumed was the human they spoke of. This, Ash. He'd think about that later. For now, it was time to recover his strength. Charmander, I want to tell you something. Charmander looked around, startled. He'd got much more into eating than he had thought. Clearly, if this human had got that close without his noticing. This is going to sound strange, probably unbelievable, but, Ash smiled gently. This isn't the first time we've met. It's just the first this time around. You're right, that is unbelievable. What are you even talking about? Time travel. Ash crouched down, took out a small red box and flipped it open. That's you. Charmander inspected the picture carefully. There was the tiny, almost invisible scar on the tail, there was the eye fleck, everything about the picture was incredibly familiar. It was good evidence, to be sure. The device spoke as the picture changed. This is also you. Charmander now looked astonished. That was, certainly not a Charmander. This person was saying that in the future he would evolve into a Charizard. That he wasn't too weak, too feeble to ever manage such a thing. But Damien had said he needed toughening up, was that right instead? Was it the toughening that led to this evolution? The human was now looking strangely sad. I have a certain power. If you want, you can be, sort of reminded of what happened to the Charmander I remember. To the, you I remember. But I'd never do it without your permission. Ash sank to the floor, sitting on a tree stump. So, what do you think? Grrrh, that Ash. I swear he does it to annoy us. Misty forced her way through yet another bramble bush, in the direction Pikachu had been pointing that morning. They were trying to find the wayward member of their party, but unfortunately he'd shot off practically directly between the two easiest paths in the area, and this had led to the current circumstance. Brock and Misty using the Pewter Man's heavy hitters to break trail through increasingly hostile terrain, while Pikachu and Riolu made some pretense of scouting despite their anxiety over Ash. If it wasn't bad enough that we got lost barely 2 days travel from my hometown, we turn out to be lost in the same way as before. And we all know what that means, we'll take 2 weeks to make a 3-day trip. And if we take 2 weeks, then we don't have time to detour back to Cerulean to grab the particular Magikarp I need, much less see if Ash can evolve it, and that means, Gura. I hate being this specialized. I used to have a Corsola, a Dugong, a Togekiss. Now all it takes to beat me is a grass or electric type. Misty continued ranting for a few more minutes, then calmed down slightly. Ah well, at least you share my pain, right, Brock? Brock cast around desperately for something to divert Misty from remembering that he was in line to have bug, grass, water, fighting, normal and fire types in the course of their journey, many of them in the next year. He was saved by Pikachu and Riolu suddenly starting to shout, jumping up and down on their tree branch with such energy it looked like it might break. Misty looked interested. Well, what is it? Where did Ash go? Is he coming back? Brock glanced through his binoculars, then lowered them. See for yourself. With a mighty roar and a pair of slamming wingbeats, Charizard triumphantly landed before them in a clearing of his own making, Ash laughing and waving from his grip on the fire-type's neck. The enemy approached the shores of Indonesia in a stunning outflanking maneuver that took them straight past the defenses, from Iceland. That's not how the game works. Palkia. Sir Aaron sighed deeply. Boss, back me up on this one. I see no problem with it, Knight of Honor. Risk does not work this way. He just created a wormhole, for your sake. And I don't think Dialga also playing in the past on a second board is very fair, either. Once we finish the game, then it's your turn to decide what we play next again. Are you Damien? The indicated boy paused in enumerating the virtues of his Pokémon collection to turn to the speaker. That's me. Why? Want a battle? Ash smiled. It had very little warmth. Not me. No. I thought I'd make you aware of a few of the laws here in Kanto, that's all. What do you mean? Damien was puzzled. He'd grown up here. Of course he knew what the laws were. Ash flipped open his Pokédex, accessing one of the pages of notes he'd made in preparation. First up, an old law from well before the invention in Johto of the Pokeball. One that references the position of Pokémon that willingly follow a trainer, as, in fact, in a similar position as household members of a feudal lord, the initial intention being a comparison with hunting dogs and such, but for more than just Houndour and Growlithe. Damien merely looked confused. So, I'm getting to that. Second is a UN resolution from the 50s, defining the legal status of a Pokémon as being dependent on the tested intelligence of that Pokémon. Since the intelligence of Pokémon varies wildly within a species, in cases where the tested IQ and reasoning capacity of a Pokémon falls within the bounds of one standard deviation below the human average or higher, that Pokémon will be considered to be in an equal legal status as a human for all intents and purposes. Still not seeing the point. We'll get there. But in the meantime, I heard from someone that you had a Charmander. Where is it? Damien laughed harshly. That weakling. I told him to wait for me on a rock out of town, a few days ago. He's probably still waiting. Hey. Fool. I'm not coming back for him. Ash glanced at his companions. You too. Heard and witnessed. Damien looked suspicious all of a sudden. What was that about? Finally, a law from the Tokugawa Shogunate that states, in case of a loyal retainer being betrayed unto death by a lord through no fault of his own, and he survive, he may make one return strike if the plot is proven. Despite the sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach, Damien tried to stay defiant. And the point of all that is. Brock held out a Boulder badge, the special one that confirmed his post. Gym leader of Pewter, fully accredited by the Kanto League. Misty held up her own Cascade badge. Gym leader of Cerulean, same. Ash's smile was now positively arctic. Gym leaders used to be the courts in their areas of jurisdiction. Their testimony still holds up legally thanks to the rigorous character tests involved in assuming the position. Your abandoned Charmander is intelligent enough to count as human, and hence a retainer. You left him to die in the rain with malice intent. He gets a return strike. He's behind you. Damien froze, then turned jerkily, looking at about 2 feet above the ground. When all he saw was a pair of enormous legs, he looked up. And up. Charizard waited until Damien was looking him in the eye, terrified and about to pass out, before inhaling massively. To Damien, there were comparisons to looking down the barrel of a gun. There was a gaping maw, a dark tunnel behind, there was a glow around the bend of the tunnel now, swelling in intensity and transiting from red to orange to yellow to bluish white. Charizard bent down to bring his huge head to the same height as that of his former trainer, and blew gently, knocking Damien onto his backside with a painful thump. Then he wrinkled his nose. Apparently Damien's fear had loosened his, let us just call it his, control, and leave it at that. Ash strolled over to the thoroughly humiliated trainer and pointed his thumb at Charizard. He's a better person than you. How does that make you feel? That, if he hadn't been willing to forgive you abandoning him to die, you'd be a smear of soot. Damien choked out a whimper. Ash looked down a moment longer, then turned his back. Come on, guys, let's head over to Route 9. I think that's where we have to go next. And they left him in the dirt, not bothering to spare him even a backward glance. Ash, something I want to ask you to do for me. Ash looked at Charizard, puzzled. They were stopping overnight in Cerulean City, and Misty was planning on picking up her future Gyarados the next morning. Her aura training with Ash and Brock had progressed far enough that she could just manage a bastardized form of the site. It should be enough to tell which of the Magikarp she had a certain connection to, hopefully. What is it, then, big guy? You know I trained for years at the Cherasific Valley. Well, that's the thing. I'll have to approach this slowly. Do you know what the most destructive elemental type is? Ash smirked. I assume it's fire. Right. The most powerful 2 fire type attacks really show this. Most potent of all is the one that won the last World War, used twice by a Pokémon that isn't just a user of fire but is fire, in the purest sense of the word. Vinnick T was ordered to use V-Generate, and an entire city was wiped away, just like that. Ash was astonished. He knew that Hiroshima and Nagasaki had been destroyed, of course, but one attack. How do you know this? I was taught it when I first learned the second most powerful of all fire attacks. It's one I had to submit to strict rules about, it's incredibly powerful. It's called Blast Burn, and it is one I absolutely cannot use under my own volition. I must be ordered to use it. I don't understand. I'm sorry to say, why? Because if a Charizard is strong enough to learn Blast Burn, then a Charizard is strong enough that using Blast Burn will actually strip the atoms of the targeted material of their electrons, turning it into plasma. Much like I heard from Pikachu that his Volt Crash at double power from charge actually evaporated a swimming pool at point of contact, Blast Burn destroys whatever it hits. There is essentially no exception. Even legendary Pokémon do not generally have this level of firepower behind them. Tell you what. Can you show me? Charizard nodded. I believe the peaks of the rock tunnel area are sufficiently uninhabited, and I can get there inside an hour. Okay. Charizard. Blast Burn. For a moment, it was to the eye as if nothing had happened, though Ash could feel his mount's aura shifting and roiling with heat. Then, the air tore as a cone of plasma, a foot wide at Charizard's mouth and focusing down to needle-like intensity at the target, smashed through it for a terrible fraction of a second. The area of impact didn't melt, didn't really vaporize. The energy transfer was too sudden and too fast for that. The entire area simply shattered into tiny chips of granite and rock mush. The heat of the initial attack, however, was still spreading through the shattered region by conduction, melting the entire area down to lava even as it shattered and continuing the process further out. By the time the effects of the attack were fully visible, it was as a shallow, 30-meter radius crater on the rocky surface of the mountain, mostly full of lava still glowing with heat. Holy hell. I see why you wanted to tell me about it, that's practically unsurvivable. Yes. And what I want is for you to tell me when it's okay to use. I had a mental block artificially created in my mind. All those who learned the attack did, that means we can't use it ourselves. And a good thing too, or we'd most likely use it in anger. I'd say it's unnecessary, but given what we face regularly, don't hesitate to remind me of it when the fate of the world hangs in the balance. Freakin' brilliant. So we follow them when they leave Cerulean, and they go west, then north, then east, then south and end up right back where they started. Sometimes it's not worth getting out of bed. Meowth sighed again, then lay back against Growly's flank. The wolf's body heat had been essential during the cold nights outdoors, and the two had developed something of a truce. Meowth would try not to insult the larger Pokémon, and Growly would warn him when he did. Wonder when James and Jessie are coming back. Bink. Two humans, a cobra, a floating industrial disaster, a small dinosaur wearing a skull and a levitating fox all materialized in an instant. Gah. The humans promptly fell over, as they'd materialized at a 45-degree angle to the floor. Was that really necessary? Jessie grumbled as she got up. Yes it was. Well, more amusing really, but it's all the same to me. Oh, hi, guys. James sounded inordinately cheerful. Could be that he'd never again have to go through Rock Tunnel. Ever. Any progress? They caught dat Charizard and Bulbasaur again. Oh, and Ash blew da Cerulean gym roof off. Jessie and James looked astonished. You mean, this happens to them even when we're not around? Jessie jumped into the air, punching it in exuberance. Yes. It's not just us who are chew toys of fate. James looked morose. Maybe if we stay away from him for more of the time, our own luck would increase. Hey, that's a good idea. I suppose we can use my teleport to get to them whenever we need to, and do our own thing while they're lost. Arbok spoke up. What about challenging gyms? They seem to enjoy it. Jessie looked blank. Meowth sighed, muttering something about speaking lessons for the entire team, then translated. You know, that sounds like quite a good idea. Where should we go first? James leafed through the guidebook, a surprisingly comprehensive one by a company called Prima. Rock. No, Electric. Hell no. They're going there next. I think Sabrina's still bonkers. The water gym is out of commission. Grass is a possibility. Aha. Koga of Fuchsia Town is a poison trainer. We've got a ground type, a psychic and two poisons, one of them with dig. We have a chance. Oh, and he also uses some bugs. That's Growly's role. Jesse nodded. That's settled. Then, hey, what about me? Jesse thought for a moment. I got nothing. You really need a more varied set of moves. Meowth grumbled, and resolved to buy the official guide to his species next time he was in a major city. Surely there was something he could learn. Well, since the Ash, has such a sense of flair, we'll just go and do our thing and then wait somewhere for him. Not as if we could miss him, and we're way faster than him now. That okay with you? A snore came from Abra's Pokeball. Hey, right, we'll ask him tomorrow. Jesse looked askance at the ball. When did he even get in? Most of the newly enlarged rocket cell turned in early, but not all of them. A single figure stayed up far into the night, running through combinations with her club. I won't let you down, any of you. Not after last time someone trusted me. So that's what's going on, Squirtle. You have the memories of the future back now. What I want to know is if you're going to be coming with me again. Squirtle nodded contemplatively. After a few seconds, he flared his aura, a trick that Ash certainly hadn't taught him yet. His training clearly hadn't been in vain, and struck a pose. The reputation of the Squirtle squad echoes across the land. When people talk about their badass leader, they're talking about me. Ash, Pikachu, Riolu, Misty and Brock all facefaulted. 3 years since he's seen you and this is the first thing he does. Muttered Misty. Of course I'm coming with you, Ash. I came of my own volition last time, and that's just not going to change. A smaller, goggles-wearing Squirtle next to him started going on about his bro, and how awesome he was. Riolu shifted over to Pikachu, and whispered in his ear. Was he always like this? Pikachu shook his head, but remembered seeing some anime or other on TV, when Ash was crashing out in a Pokémon Center after going uphill on a cycling road or something. I believe he discovered an anime series or 3 since I last met him, mostly involving giant robots. Well, now that's settled, we better get moving. Where next? Best you travel by Pidgeot and Charizard. Your next appointment is Cerulean Cape. Misty looked pissed. What? We go the exact opposite direction to Vermilion again. Don't blame me, blame the fact that none of you could read a map. Not willing to allow another argument to take over, Ash took out his 2 Flyers Pokeballs. Come on, guys, we've got a trip across water ahead of us. As he formed, Charizard stretched his wings till they popped. Ah, that hits the spot. Gotcha. Ash, oh, hey, Squirtle. I see you've been training too. We move beyond the people we were a minute before, each revolution of the Earth driving us to improve more than the last. There was an audible ting of light off Squirtle's shades. Yeah, let's go with that. Pikachu shook his head. He's got it bad. Welcome to Fuchsia Gym. I am Koga, the leader, and I will ask you to perform a challenge before I will battle you. Jesse, James and their Pokémon listened intently to the rules of the challenge. They were wearing tops with J on instead of the Rocket R, but otherwise their getup hadn't changed. The gyms of Kanto allowed anyone to compete, and as long as it took people a few minutes to link them with Team Rocket they could battle the leader and be away with Abra. Well, that was the theory anyway. There was one member of their group, however, who was less interested than the rest in the explanation being given. Jesse's right. I ain't no use against a serious battler, Meowth muttered to himself as he wandered off into the rooms of the gym. I ain't human enough. I ain't any use as a Pokemon, about all I'm good for is translatin' stuff. Perhaps I can be of assistance. Da hell. Is there another Meowth in here? There is indeed. A female scratch cat seemed to phase out of the stonework, a headband with a stylized heart design on her brow. Meowth, with his experience of being hit with nearly every attack in the book and some improvised ones, recognized the effect as a feint attack's precursor stage. Not that he was paying close attention or anything. Ya said something about assistance. The other Meowth nodded, and stretched sinuously. You're depressed, despite your unique skills. I can remedy that depression quite easily. Come with me. He nodded, but looked back almost as soon as he had. What about the others? They're taking the gym challenge. I know where they're going. You don't think we have to run an obstacle course every time we need a pint of milk, do you? So, that is the basic layout. You have 30 minutes to complete the course, if you want to compete against me in battle. If you do not make it in time, you will have to try again later. Koga made a few shapes with his hands and vanished in a puff of smoke. TCH. Show off. James took out his Abra's ball. What? That was a hidden coughing making the smoke, he just ran off while he was obscured. Sure, he's good, but he can't teleport. Speaking of which, Koga came out of his body flicker maneuver in the main battle chamber of the fuchsia mansion he had claimed as his gym. With a gesture, he activated the cameras hidden throughout the course. He may as well record their amusing antics for later. Bink. The challenging team materialized in front of him, the humans, strangely, upside down. He'd really have to make sure to disallow teleport in the future, but he couldn't deny that was ingenuity. Thud. Ow. That hurt. Get off me, James. Not as if I can help anything, James replied to himself as he righted himself. I am impressed with your speed around the course, challengers. Koga spoke up, reminding them he was standing right there. Rest assured, it will not be a permissible method to complete the course again, though. Abra rolled his eyes. Brilliant. Be that as it may, I will now begin the battle. Send out your first Pokémon. Koga put actions to words by sending a Grimer onto the field, starting small to gauge his opponent's mettle. Jessie's Cubone walked forward into the center field unprompted, and gestured to Koga, speaking rapidly in her own species dialect. What's she saying? I only understand most poison types, I'm afraid. Abra floated a little higher. She asks for all your Pokémon at once. Koga stared for a moment. The little dinosaur wanted what? She is most insistent. Koga sighed. Fine. If you want to lose that much, little girl. Cubone's eyes flashed. No one called her that, especially not in that tone. Koga threw his other Pokeballs, assembling his entire team. Venonat, Golbat, Muck, Coughing, and a Skuntank. Where did that last one come from? James exclaimed. Koga raised an eyebrow delicately. Looking flustered, James replied shakily, well, they're Sinnoh native, right? Koga coughed. Ahem, he was a present from my daughter last Hanami festival. He shook his head. Now, are you ready? Cubone nodded, then cast aside her thick club and walked slowly into the center of the arena. Raising her head high, she began to speak in what sounded like a chant. Bone bone coo bone. Jessie looked befuddled. What's that? After a few seconds in which Meowth did not volunteer an explanation, everyone noticed he was missing. Cubone carried on with her chant, and Koga's team watched in interest. Abra eventually put everyone out of their misery. The first part means, I am the bone of my club, but I don't know what that is supposed to mean, unless, he noticed the currents of energy curling around the arena. Oh, very good indeed. I didn't even suspect she knew how to do this. My bones are the earth, my skin is the sky. I have wielded the past of thousands. Serving life, understanding death, yet on the razor's edge between the two. What is it? James asked in concern. What's she doing? My past and future collide on the grassy plain. I ask for only the bones of the hills. Abra replied tersely. Reality marble. And then there was no need to explain, as blue and red fire remade the world into a field of swaying grass, a field of bones, under a stormy sky. Koga gasped. What is this? Cubone ignored him, staring at her opponents. They looked less sure of themselves now, 6-on-1 clearly felt much less safe to them. Finally the Skuntank spoke up. What is this? Where are we? Cubone smiled, not that it could be seen with the skull in the way. This is my soul. Tread lightly. Then she charged, bones flying into her hand from the great assemblages all around, and back out again just as fast, as she proceeded her assault with a series of flying boomerangs. Holy crap! Several of Koga's Pokémon yelled, flailing desperately at the storm of bones, ribs, tibia, fibula, humerus, scapula and all manner of others. Cubone was gratified at the effect her distraction was having, and it had certainly served its purpose by now. She was in range. She grabbed a thigh bone that looked like it was off a Snorlax, one that had seemed to just appear as she reached for it, smashed the Grimer into the coughing, and both out into the edges of her reality marble. 2 down. Next she took the spine of some kind of sinuous creature, perhaps a dragonair, and sliced Muck in half, before throwing it so it carried the discorporate goop into the distance. 3 to go. Venonat was next, and was simply bashed on the head with a long, thin bone club, a measured blow that merely caused unconsciousness. She was careful with those targets with skeletons of their own to break. 2 left. Golbat was high in the air by now, out of range of any throw she could manage with a heavy bone, and started laughing down at her. You think to defeat Ninja with a single trick? Cubone nodded, and snapped her claws together. A storm of knucklebones flew into the air, and peppered the Golbat until he was dizzy. Then they all started sticking to his wings and dragged him down. This is my soul, remember? Did you think it would be that easy? She idly conjured a bone rush staff from thin air and threw it like a javelin, knocking him on the forehead and putting him out for the count. 1 left. She looked around for any sign of her final foe. The Skuntank burst from the floor next to her, having dug underground to escape the bone blizzard, and captured her in his tail. You fought well, but now is the end. He gloated, moving his tailtip towards her and letting the pilot light flare up for a flamethrower. Cubone pointed over her captor's shoulder. What is it? She simply pointed again. Sighing heavily, he looked round, and saw an enormous skeletal Tyranitar, rearing back as it roared to the heavens. Oh, come on. That's just ridiculous. Skuntank made to flee, but was too late as the construct knocked him out cold with its tail. Cubone freed herself from the limp Skuntank's constrict, and looked over her handiwork. She permitted herself a tiny nod of satisfaction. I won't be weak. Not ever again. The flames came again, and the savanna grasses became a distant memory. All that was left was her team, the 6 unconscious poison types, and Koga, mouth open in shock. You fought amazingly well. Here is the soul badge. As Jessie accepted the badge on behalf of her Pokémon and James scooped up Cubone from the ground, a voice familiar to the Rockets cried out. Yes. Yes. My Lady Mew. Yes. Jessie and James cringed in unison. That was Meowth, but it didn't sound like they wanted to hear where he'd been for the last 20 minutes or so. Less than a minute later, he walked in with a huge grin, right next to the female Meowth that had originally led him off. Guess why da cat's so happy? Jessie mumbled something about not wanting to know. Ya don't wanna. Fine, I'll show ya. The Rocket's eyes bulged. Did he just say he'd show us? Meowth drew back his paw, and flung 3 golden coins into the ceiling. There was a pause. Did you just use payday, Meowth? James asked, dumbfounded. Well, yeah, this friendly cat here, he indicated the ninja Meowth, took da time to show me what I was doing wrong. Oh, so that's what you were doing? Jessie exclaimed, with some relief. Meowth looked puzzled. What else would I have been doing? James coughed. And never mind about that. Well, that was strange. Misty tried, the first to speak for fully 10 minutes after they had left Bill's lighthouse. Ash snorted, and moved Pidgeot in closer to his friends on Charizard. Yeah, strange doesn't begin to cover it. So apparently the Dragonite that Bill signaled was one of the Chinese Dragon Kings. Brock nodded. Pretty much. Why are you going over all this? Ash ground his teeth. I am trying to maintain my sanity. It's quite hard. So, to check I wasn't hallucinating. The Dragon King was the Dragon King of the Southeast. Misty grimaced. Yes. And southeast of China is. Brock covered his ears. Stop. Before I start having flashbacks and fall off, please. I think I could have handled it were it not for the can of Foster's the size of a small truck. After a few more seconds and an almost visible shudder, the travelers shook off the memory of the Australian Dragon King, and set course for Vermilion. Pidgeot was showing off her supersonic speed to the slower Charizard, further burdened as he was by 2 passengers, but declined when he suggested teasingly that they should swap loads. She didn't fancy carrying 2 humans and their full-weight packs, thank you very much. At least Ash had remembered to catch Kingler before they went to the Cape proper. She remembered the crustacean from their league challenge in Kanto, as a good battler. As he had more of a relationship with Oak than with Ash, he'd been sent to the lab until needed, most likely for the Cinnabar Gym challenge. Make no mistake, he was one heck of a battler, but not one of the easier ones to use. Unlike most of Ash's Pokémon, he was a devoted specialist in his type. Besides, Squirtle covered the water type already. A smirk chased briefly across the features of a silver-haired woman, in an airship hovering over Verity Lakefront. Interesting. A job in the Kanto region, huh? I'm not impressed with the starting offer, but the second payment is most enticing. And to be able to catch an Arcanine, too. I notice the task is simply that the Pokémon be caught, not what happens to it subsequently. She considered a moment more, before coming to a decision. Venturing in range of the skies protected by the Blackthorn clan would be unpleasant, but she was confident her unique technologies would let her succeed. Helm. Change course. Head south. Exec. All hands commence combat drills and switch to loadout D on the outer cannons. Remain in cloak until we are over the water. Come to think of it, I wonder if the beasts of Johto, or the birds of Kanto might make interesting targets as well. It's been so long since I broke a legend to my will. As the friends circled the port of Vermilion before landing, Misty pointed out the SS. Anne. Well, there it is. It's hard to remember now. I loved it so much I built models of it, really. Ash had caught most of that, and replied soberly. I suppose nearly dying on board a sinking ship would affect that. For a moment the group was silent. Then Ash lifted his head, the melancholy mood simply flowing from his face. Well, time for me to try for another gym badge. He urged his mount towards the ground. You never change, Ash. Brock grinned, and the 2 gym leaders followed on Charizard. By the time they had caught up, Ash was already at the main door to the gym and sorting through his Pokeballs. Damn it. No flying types, no water types, that leaves Pikachu, Riolu and Bulbasaur for the gym. You guys okay for it? The 3 nodded, just before Brock arrived on the scene. You sure you don't want to borrow one of my Pokémon, Ash? It would help. Ash shook his head. No thanks, I doubt we'll have much trouble. Well, you're a bit young to be battling my gym. Any reason for the tiny little Pokémon? You're not trying the gym challenge with a newbie team, are you? Ash gritted his teeth. The American was incredibly aggravating, even with Ash knowing he could win. Shut up. I've got several evolved Pokémon, it's just that they're all water or flying types. Gov Lieutenant Governor. Surge looked askance at his challenger. You're a peppy one, aren't you, brat? Fine. Then I declare my challenge. You must face me in 3 separate one-on-one battles. All 3 Pokémon you choose must beat their opponent in order to win you the Thunder Badge. Ash gaped. What? You heard me. This should teach you to respect your betters, boy. Just how old is he? Ash mused. He sounds like Agatha. Fine. You want to open this one, Bulbasaur? Sure. Surge gave a slight smirk. Good to see you're not completely clueless. Electrode. Bulbasaur trotted out onto the battlefield, ready for his first formal battle in a good few years. Well, here we go. Let's see, an Electrode. Can't remember what their thing was. The match began. Electrode revved, blurred into motion, and exploded at close range to Bulbasaur. Oh, yeah, that was it. Bulbasaur sank his vines into the floor to act as a brake and was yanked to a halt about halfway to the wall. As he retracted them to regain mobility, he saw that Electrode was effectively undamaged from the blast. This was going to be all kinds of not fun. Bulbasaur began the fight proper by sending a vine whipping into the ceiling and gripping the rafters, trying to stay out of Electrode's reach by reeling himself up to the ceiling. This did manage to evade explosion range, but didn't get him completely off the hook. A bolt of electricity from the alpha variant of Shockwave unerringly homed in on him, actually turning 2 corners to track his erratic swings before it impacted, sending him out of control and forcing him to disengage before the vine snapped. This isn't good. Oh, that might work. Surprising many watching, Bulbasaur hit the ground and left a small, deep crater. Surge quickly worked it out. He's used Dig. I didn't know Bulbasaur could even do that. Ash gave a grin. Most can't, but most of them aren't the ones that travel with me. Don't get cocky, brat. Electrode. Shock wave. Another of the homing bolts snapped off and, unfortunately for Surge, simply smacked into the ground and did nothing. What the? Oh, I see. I've never tried that against an underground target, because most of them are ground types and aren't affected anyway. So, where's your little grass type? Ash closed his eyes, started, then gave a grin. He's down there, all right, and he's doing exactly what he should. Pikachu and Riolu closed their eyes too to take a peek with Aura Sight, then ran for the nearest cover. Growth, 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 and now, Frenzy Plant. An enormous tree of wooden vines sprang up from the ground around Electrode, doing a number on the gym floor, and slammed together with the hapless electric type inside it. After a second or so during which the vines tightened with an ominous creak, the entire construct exploded in a shower of splinters as Electrode blew up again. Coughing, Ash and Surge both looked towards the center of the arena. Electrode was badly exhausted, but then again any Hyper Beam variant used by a non-fully evolved Pokémon burned out its elemental ability for a good few minutes. So Bulbasaur was likely in the same state as his opponent, and if so the battle was down to the wire. No pun intended. Ash cheered as a foot burst from the torn ground and kicked Electrode into the air, the impact enough to knock the Pokémon out. He ran over to the exit hole and carefully hauled Bulbasaur out. Hauled. Oh, that explains it. Ivysaur. Then, what happened to you? I overdid it on the growth, it triggered the evolution. Wow, that feels weird, I've got petals now, and fronds, trippy. Nice work, buddy. Ash recalled Ivysaur, and flashed a grin at the lieutenant. HMPH. Don't get cocky, little boy. Magneton. Show him the error of his ways. Ash gestured Riolu forward. Take him. Not a problem. Wow, they're really committed to this, Pikachu mused. I suppose it's just the way we all get riled up by a good fight. He then noticed Surge's Raichu, sitting calmly on the edge of the arena. On seeing his soon-to-be opponent's attention, the Raichu made a series of gestures suggesting that Pikachu was a total softie and rather untalented. Let's leave it at that. Oh, it's so on. Magneton began to glow, sparks dancing off its various magnets, and levitated a good 10 feet into the air. As a Pokémon even weaker to ground attacks than the rest, it was a standard starting move for the magnet Pokémon. Riolu affected a bored posture, not particularly concerned with what was coming. Surge clenched his fist. It was a part of his battle style to piss his opponent off, to encourage them into a straight-line power contest, which he would then naturally win, but it wasn't going to plan here. If anything, he was the one being affected more. Magneton. Double team and flash. See how cocky he is when he can't even see you. Riolu flinched back as the wall of light assaulted his vision. Every single of the dozen or so images of Magneton had lit up like a halogen lamp, instantly flash blinding him but also screwing up his nerves, so he couldn't even hide from it. Through the shooting headache he was starting to develop as Magneton added metal sound to the mix, he faintly heard a voice. "I'll. Re-y. Oka. Ov. Air." How was he hearing anything over this assault? Oh. Te there. I'll. Row it ov. In fact, Riolu. Stop paying attention to the noise and catch the damn blindfold. That wasn't a voice, but that was certainly Ash. Riolu snatched the blindfold. Sir Aaron's blindfold, in fact, as it flew past him, and bound up his eyes. With the constant assault of light gone, he could feel his concentration starting to recover. And with his eyes covered, he could see. So the baby closes his eyes to hide from the world. How is he going to battle now, then? His opponent isn't even on the ground, where he might run into it. Riolu began gathering energy. Ash shot a glance at Surge. Don't you know about Riolu at all? They can sense aura, like the aura of living things. He's fully aware where your magneton is. Riolu nodded as his gathered power concentrated in his palm and began to spin. The Vermilion Gym leader chuckled. Okay, point to you. But I recognize that attack from your Japanese anime series, it's a close-ranged attack. Ash and Pikachu shrugged at each other, mystified. What anime was that, then? Surge looked shifty. Something about a kid with a Nettles sealed in him or whatever. I don't claim to be much a fan. Riolu threw the aura sphere at Magneton, sending Surge's electric, steel type neatly through the wall. Surge blinked. What? Ash ran over to check Riolu was okay, before shooting a glance at Surge. Don't believe everything you see on TV. Hey, a good point from you again. Surge sobered, and pointed at the gym motto as a pair of magnemite floated over to the hole, seeming to repair it with some kind of electrical arc welding. So, time for the final test. You've had 2 of the 3 tenets of electric power. Speed, you handled. Precision, you dealt with. Now it's time for raw power. Raichu. Pikachu. The 2 electric mice faced one another in the middle of the arena, neither making a move at first. A baby Pokémon for a baby trainer. Do you have some kind of problem with evolving your Pokémon, boy? Ash forced himself to stay calm. Deep breaths, focus on clarity. Suppose he's just as much a wimp as you, then. Pikachu's eyes flashed. Who did this person think he was? Insulting Ash like that. The Pokémon knew full well that at this point Ash could, were it necessary, beat Surge into the floor, for all the latter's military experience. And with the way this was going, it looked like Surge would just keep up the taunting until he got a response. What's the matter? Scared to fight me? Right, that was it. Pikachu charged forward, surging with electricity in a volt tackle. Raichu yawned, and threw a thunder at Pikachu that slammed him to a dead stop, before slashing into him with another pair of thunderbolts that completely paralyzed him and threw him back into Ash's diving catch. Pikachu, how? Ash stood up, glaring at Surge. How did you do that? Pikachu has faced down dragons and gods before, how did that overpower him? Surge chuckled, and strolled forward. It's not a question of skill, or training. In battles between electric Pokémon, the most important question is how high a voltage they can generate. Sadly for you, my Raichu's electric potential is too high for your Pikachu to approach. That's why I said power was important. Surge tossed a Thunderstone from his pocket to Ash. Feel free to evolve him and come back later. I'll even waive the first 2 battles, isn't that nice? Ash clenched his teeth, and curled his arms protectively around Pikachu. I'll go away, and train, and we'll come back, and Pikachu will kick your ass. The American didn't say anything. Why are you looking at me like that? Surge pointed down. Ash looked. Oops. The Thunderstone, forgotten in Ash's fist, had just made contact with Pikachu's tail. Well, crap. Pikachu. He came groggily round. The pain had been indescribable after the Thunderstone had contacted his fur, but after a few moments everything had gone mercifully blank. His nervous system had opened of its own accord to drink in the energy, but his aura, responding to his will, had fiercely defended him from the effects. He had no idea what the result had been. As his senses came back one by one, he first perceived the smell of burnt fur, sap and hot metal. Still in the gym then. His electric sense opened up next, and it was amazingly fuller and richer than before, his power wells so much stronger, like he'd been wearing insulation all his life. He could only remember that kind of boost once before. And it had been when he'd ceased being a Pichu. So he had evolved then. That was unfortunate, but it had been mainly his personal preference and his minor phobia of the Raichu he remembered from childhood that had stopped him. He could learn to cope. For Ash. Well, better get used to the differences, like the tail. He tried to curl his tail up close to his body, like he had seen many of his evolved. No, his form do. Why is it so stiff? Then his hearing returned. You okay, Pikachu? Ash hurriedly crouched to the floor, and went for his bag. Notes on evolution. Gloves, cape. Pikachu was resisting the evolution, so that helped, but he had only about a minute. Riolu, get over here, I need your help on this one. What do you need me to do? Force the energy of the stone back into it, contain it, I'll get it out of Pikachu. The trainer and Pokémon worked as fast as they could, heedless of the odd observance of Surge and his Raichu as the two did what seemed to be magic. Okay. No more is coming out. How are things on your end? Not so good. I got as much out as I could, but there's still some left. Only a few seconds before it settles, and it'll change wherever it is to match Raichu body structure. Damn, I was so close to getting it all, but it's too deep-rooted. Riolu glanced at the pained face of his teammate, then had a sudden inspiration. Send it to the cheeks. They're power reservoirs for either form. Ash spared a glance at his youngest Pokémon, even as his aura stopped trying to check the evolution energy's effects and instead forced it as fast as possible to the one place where the change wouldn't badly injure Pikachu. That's brilliant. Okay. Give me some help here. So, I have not evolved. Not really. No. You've come as close to it as any Pokémon ever has, but you've not evolved. You have, however, picked up the electric sacs of a Raichu, and possibly some kind of other changes. Since you're still able to move, I assume it's nothing serious. Ash then took something from Riolu. This is what's left of the stone, if you want it. Seems weird to me, it's nothing like any Thunderstone I've ever seen before. Pikachu stared at the bluish globe. It was indeed unusual. Thunderstones held a crystallized lightning bolt, whereas this, the lightning within was dancing, caged but still fully mobile. I think it's a light ball. I've only ever heard of them. They're incredibly potent and rare artifacts, they resonate with my species. Pikachu tore his eyes away and glanced at Ash. Can I? Of course. Pikachu took it, and it dissolved at his touch, running into his body like water down a drain. It felt nice, like warmth from a mug of cocoa, and the tingling of three-phase breakfast. Ash shared a look with his first Pokémon, then turned to the awestruck Surge. I think we'll take you up on that rematch now. Surge's Raichu looked up from where he was trying not to pay attention. Okay. Rematch start in 2, 1, go. Zap cannon. Raichu went straight through the recently repaired wall and vanished off into the distance. Surge gaped. Okay. What the hell was that? Pikachu ran back to Ash and climbed onto his shoulder, and the trainer took the Thunder Badge from the gym leader's unresisting hands. Superior firepower. Okay. What next? Ash sat by the side of the road, with the rest of the group. The SS. And screw that. Porta Vista next. Misty's horsey was caught there. Okay. We go there for him, nothing else. Flippin' insane mayor or whatever she was. Maiden's Peak. Not only no, but hell no. The Butterfree swarm passes overhead. Right. That's more like it. Butterfree. I would like to go with them, but retain the possibility of coming back. Any idea if there's a portable satellite uplink and Pokémon transporter package? We've got a month or so to look in Celadon City, we have the time to check. Next. Saffron Gym and all that stuff. Ash sighed. Not that nutcase again. I suppose the best approach is to make her overcome her childhood trauma, right? Yes. You could go to Lavender. I am not dying again, damn it. Oh, is that what happened? We all sort of assumed you were asleep. Right. Not happening. We may as well use the month and a half of time off the clock to train up, and I'll try and learn Aura Purge from the notes. It's apparently able to calm shadow Pokémon, so it might well work on mere emotional repression. Why? Yes. Pikachu is now half evolved. Because he deserved a power-up, and a big one, given how important he is to the series and as a character, but making him a Raichu would be somehow wrong. And a silly little Naruto reference there. The idea of how our media would be altered to fit with the setting is fun to look at. Edit. I received a review asking about it for this chapter, so. The Pokémon world is based on the real one in a lot of ways. Kanto equals Kanto. Japan. Sevi equals Izu and Bonin. Johto equals Kansai, and Chubu is split between Johto and Kanto. Hoenn equals Kyushu and Okinawa. Sinnoh equals Hokkaido. Unova, Ishu equals Manhattan and the surrounds. Or equals Arizona. Several more specific places are also directly corresponding, and in the anime places like Hollywood are mentioned by name. In the games themselves, Lieutenant Surge is described as the Lightning American and Arcanine is said to be in Chinese legends, among many others. The easiest explanation is the one I use, that the Pokémon world differs from ours, but not in the continents or large countries. Hell, one of the anime episodes mentions Thomas Edison and Albert Einstein. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked this video and make sure to like and subscribe and share this video to your friends. And please check out the fanfic story on the Maker fanfic page, the link is in the description. Alright then. See you in the next video and have a good day.